did press the start button there, so everyone remember our rules that we set. Okay. I'm your host of China Talk. I'm Frostgren, and we have our very special guest. We are doing this at a different time, if you guys noticed, just to kind of, compensate for the time zones here. But our special guest is going to be Papa Smithy, LPL shoutcaster, casting this year's LPL. Looks fantastic already. If you haven't listened to it, you should go listen to it. Of course, we've got two normal panelists on. We've got Kelsey Moser, now working for, I'm totally spacing it, The Score. There we go.
Yep.
And Razzleplasm, do you have any announcements of who you're working for?
Yep, well, Paravine and Liquid Legends.
Okay, I didn't want to spoil anything if something were to come out.
Okay.
You just dropped him in it and hoped that he could run with
I
it,
know,
though,
right?
Yeah?
I was like...
No, nothing to it.
I'm actually the new god of esports.
And this is when I announce that I'm working for... No.
The Score Raz.
Keep it down.
Okay.
No, but obviously we're doing a special episode because we really wanted to have Papa Smithy on. And to kind of give like a little bit of background, if you're super brand new to LPL, I know we kind of have a different mix of audience as far as like our core viewers. Some of them are like hardcore LPL, been watching it since the beginning. Some people are coming in newer with like the Korean Exodius coming over. Papa Smithy's been casting LPL for a really long time. Did take a bit of a break in there, but I mean, almost from like the origins, way back when. So we wanted to do an episode that was really kind of about the history, especially as we come up to prepare for the second half of the split, because right now I believe we're 5 weeks in. There's 11 weeks of LPL total. They're on Chinese New Year break. They'll come back, and on the 27th we have the big game, which is OMG versus EPG. But we kind of wanted to build up for that. So my first question, just to really soft pitch it to you guys, is going to go all the way back to 2011. And I want to talk about like the very beginnings of kind of the Chinese League of Legends scene with teams like eHome, the Great World Elite, and things like that. So I'm actually going to give it to Papa Smithy first. So just kind of like set the groundwork for me back then.
2011's even before my time. I'm going to be real here. Like I started casting the Asian scene with Enter the Dragon in 2012. So if anyone knows, anyone can open the floor to it. I mean, Kelsey's probably the person that knows that stuff the best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I wasn't watching, just to be clear, in 2011 I wasn't watching Chinese League of Legends, but I've retroactively watched a lot of the VODs, and I've kind of looked at some of the stuff that happened back there. Really, the relevant information, I think, is just people will be interested more for, I guess, the novelty factor, that PDD used to be considered like the greatest AD carry in China in 2011. This was before Wei Xiao. Messiah used to play AD carry. But to set the stage, Invictus Gaming and WE would sort of become the Chinese League of Legends rivalry of 2012, and then much later, after the golden age of WE, which we'll get into. And the team started off as Catastrophic Cruel Memory, and names on that roster that you might be familiar with would be Whites, Tabe. Actually, Xiao Xiao was the only Invictus Gaming member who was kind of on the team at the time, and he played top lane. So just kind of the novelty there, watching some of the players transfer from the rosters. There were actually 4 big teams at the time. There was WE, called World Elite, Catastrophic Cruel Melody, Memory.
Yeah.
Worst team name ever.
It was pretty bad, yeah.
NGG and
eHome.
eHome, right. And eventually eHome was formed with, and actually what happened was PDD played AD carry for NGG, and then he moved to eHome, and he played for them for a while, and notably they appeared, I think it was the first Chinese team to really appear at an international event, in one of the IEMs, where he actually played with Vasily. They appeared, and they got crushed by Moscow 5.
But the overarching idea, and the reason why I kind of wanted you to start you guys here is because there's so many big names that even if you haven't been watching LPL for that far back, you still recognize all these names. And we also kind of start crossing lines when we start talking about Noah's Ark and how long Going, Cool, and PYL, and all these like big names in LPL have been in the scene for a very long time. And so that was the main starting point for here. So now we've had a name like, you've been throwing out Tabe, Whites, obviously from Royal Club. Tabe, very famous with the Western audience due to his interview. PDD, Xiao Xiao, former IG when they were at their height. So now it's kind of like move into the golden era when things really start taking shape and these dynasty teams start forming, particularly in Invictus and World Elite.
Right. And that's kind of what I was getting at, is eventually what really started Invictus Gaming kind of going was when PDD moved from eHome to Invictus Gaming. They picked up, like, along the way, they picked up Illusion, they picked up Zatai. I think Kid was the last one to join the roster. They were impressed because he actually beat Zatai in the mid lane, and then they made him play
How old
AD
was
carry.
Kid at this point, though? That's the question.
He's like the same age as Zatai, so
But
they were
17
both
now.
like...
14? 13?
They're 17 now, yeah. So they would have been like 2011. They would have been like 13, 12.
China.
No, but I think 2012 was when they joined IG and they joined the competitive scene. So this is already getting into kind of those roots.
Mm-hmm.
So we've advanced sort of to 2012. So
Okay.
that was kind of when IG forms, and they really begin contesting, and eHome and kind of NGG sort of fade away, and we're left with World's Elites and Invictus Gaming.
Which is now where we can kind of start bringing up this storyline, because we've kind of glossed over it a little bit. I'm going to now try to throw it back to Papa Smithy, since I threw him the first
Sure.
one and he just like hot potatoed it back to me.
I just deflected it, No, thank you.
Exactly. Okay, so everyone, I think the easiest comparison to make is CLG TSM. The West is very familiar with that one. So kind of in those, in that context, with that vocabulary, set up Invictus Gaming and World Elite for me.
I mean, obviously my first involvement came just after Worlds, when obviously World Elite had already made their waves. I guess the thing most people don't realize is like how soon before World Finals, so Season 2 Worlds, Clear Love and FCZF joined that team. Like, they were pretty much a new lineup, like a relatively new lineup at Worlds. So jumping in just after Worlds to the Enter the Dragon tournament, which was back in the days of those Pan-Asia tournaments, you got a lot of those Korea and China, and even sometimes invitations of the Southeast Asia region tournaments. That tournament, I think, was the debut of Katie Rolster, Arrows and Bullets, their first event with their original lineup. Who else was there? It was World Elite and Invictus Gaming with the Chinese representatives. I think Romaine was there, which went on to become GSG, and a lot of those names still around the scene now, like Acorn, I think, was on that lineup still back then. This is, again, a long time ago. But basically, the gist of that was World Elite winning that tournament and then just going on a tear. Like, World Elite, most popular, like, we talk about popularity of teams, like, I'm sure you guys can speak to it, even like up to like early last year, like World Elite's popularity. It's just so hard to convey what percentage of like Chinese League of Legends fans were World Elite fans. It was a high number.
Yeah, something that one of my friends who's Chinese likes to say is that even people who don't really play League of Legends or know what it is know who World Elite are, right?
So I mean, like a soccer analogy would be like Manchester United, right? Like a team that I think they come up with a stat, Manchester United, that like 1 in 4 people in the world is a Manchester United fan, which doesn't really mean anything, but it lets you know just how pervasive the team name and kind of the iconology. Like, even if you don't know League of Legends really well, you knew World Elite. It's in the icons in the client is like the clincher, right? Like, for that to be true is crazy, to be honest. But and then Invictus Gaming, they were like, it took 2 to tango. That's why great rivalries are all about, how good your opposition. Invictus Gaming on their day, like, especially back then, like, the one thing I could say about Invictus Gaming is that their like performance in best of ones, or like their performance in like surprise strategies like turret diving. They were one of the first teams to really aggressively turret dive, and their off-meta picks. PDD could play anything in top. Like, just the natural rivalry between those two teams was just wonderful to watch. And there were so many tournaments without like the LPL, without like a league system. These teams were still facing each other in best of fives at a really regular clip, which is why it was so exciting to follow.
So,
I just want to say, like, regional familiarity was such a big thing, just because like World Elite was going on to their strongest point, like, obviously, like, they were probably renowned as like the best team in the world. I guess we're going to talk about that later, but like even still, like, IG was taking them to the furthest
5 games every time,
like every single time. And that's actually how I got into like Chinese League of Legends. I wasn't like watching it like dedicated at that time, but every single time I'd like watch it just for kind of like IG and World Elite. And IG was my favorite team because they would just try crazy stuff, and they would always take them to 5 games. So it was pretty funny to watch.
And I
So,
think
So
kind of give me the shorthand a little bit, because we've talked about what this rivalry became and kind of like the domestic precedence of it and a little bit of the global context. But who are these teams? Like, can you guys give me a condensed version of? We say that IG's like crazy. They came up with the crazy picks. They do the crazy turret dives. But can you guys take both these teams and break them down? Like, where were their powers weighted in lane? Who were the members to watch out for, and kind of how they worked as teams as far as play style?
I think I probably can. Like World Elite were always a late game focused team. The moment they settled their roster, especially post Worlds, because if you remember, like one of the big criticisms of World Elite at Season 2 Worlds was that Wei Zhao would farm in the side waves, never group, and they just kind of got. I mean, there wasn't really the language for this, but they got out rotated to a large degree because there would be so many fights where, like Wei Zhao would be farming in the off lane, and people would look at his CS values, but he's not grouped, and it felt like they just didn't quite have their synergies down. But post Season 2 Worlds, like as these tournaments like the Enter the Dragon, the Stars War League, which we'll get to, were happening, they found their timings better, and they were just the best team in the world at taking games late. Like they were so good at understanding their power spikes. They were very quick. I mean, the famous article that Clement Chu was referencing on his Summoning Insight appearance recently, the whole control of the side waves, the sixth man. Like they were very on top of that at a very at the infancy of the scene, to the point where they were just able to. They were the best team at extending a game to late, and their late game team fighting was unparalleled. That's basically my observation of World Elite.
And Invictus Gaming, I think, is interesting because they have these ridiculous highs, and WE during this period was definitely more controlled in terms of their ability to be dominant for such an extended period of time, and have this sort of consistent identity and playstyle, whereas Invictus Gaming just had these highs where they found something that worked, and then just would inexplicably fall apart, just like a seesaw all the time. I think going into the Season 2 World Championships, IG almost kind of seemed like the better Chinese team. They had just won the Nice Game tournament against Azubu Frost, which was the big Korean team going into the Season 2 Worlds, right? And it was a pretty exciting finals. It was like 3-2. I can't remember the super details, but it was really interesting, and I think there were even a lot of people who, well, not a lot, but like an obscure, like a small pocket who thought maybe IG could pull an upset at Season 2 Worlds. But at the same time, IG had almost like this one player would be good and then they would fall out. PDD had this insistence on playing like always this damage style top laner. Zatai would have these like weird pocket picks that worked for a while, but you kind of got this idea that he wasn't super serious all the time.
And then you had Kid, who was always consistent, and he was almost always watched. Because, I mean, IG basically at that point would win a game in the first 15 minutes or 20 minutes through, like, crazy turret dives or rotations. And if World Elite could, like, weather the storm and stay within 5k gold, you're like, all right, they're going to eventually get there. So it was just crazy. I mean, and then Kid was the only one whose identity wasn't, like, this crazy player. He was a pretty consistent player on a team full of eccentric players. And that was my observation of him, at
This
least.
sounds like so many different... Kelsey, pull your mic out of your face. It's like right under, you're like breathing on it really intensely. It's funny because asking you guys to kind of give like the short of who these teams are, it sounds so often like a lot of the rivalries that we will consistently have. Like even if you go all the way back to CLG EU, they were the late game team that they would just come out crazy at like 55 minutes in the game, they'd pull it out. More recently, we have like the Samsung Blue versus Samsung White comparison, like that crazy early snowball aggression versus the patient waiting, big team fight. So I don't know. I find it a little bit curious how these storylines just keep happening. We keep having these two massive difference in styles competing against each other. But there we go. That's the synopsis of who these teams were, and we've kind of now touched upon just the very beginning of kind of their dominance and things like that. So let's now push the clock forward a little bit more. We can go into like the high of World Elite and Invictus Gaming. So, and we say it all the time, but like really break down how dominant was World Elite. Because Kelsey, I think you even make some of the statements that World Elite was one of the best teams to ever play League of Legends, or was the best team to ever play League of Legends.
I don't go that far. I think there have been more dominant teams, but for the period of time that they were ahead, I think that this is kind of...
I tried to get her
Papa
to bite and
Smithy's...
she wouldn't do it. She reeled back and was like, whoa.
I saw the layup. It was coming in. Ready for the dunk. Didn't pull the trigger.
And then SKT would just like smack.
Nope.
Yep.
Talking to Papa Smithy, WE is kind of like his love, in terms of Chinese teams. So.
Are we gonna have a bromance? Is this gonna happen?
The bromance, the World Elite bromance. We were talking about Clear Love and where you'd rate him in like a top X players of all time, which is
God, let's do this.
It's the most difficult because obviously Thorin's list provokes a lot of discussion, and you look at someone like you look at the list of accomplishments for some of these players, especially the World Elite players have just this massive amount of like big wins, like land wins. Of course, people might not know, but there's just been so many tournaments run in China, especially like Asia before OGN kind of came to the fore. But like before the LPL started, there was so many land tournaments. It's still a lot of them run between seasons. So they have these list of accomplishments. Like, can you imagine how long the list of accomplishments would be for Clear Love? Like between his time on a World Elite and then because we see like you can look at Wei Zhao's like list of accomplishments and so long on that in that article. You add 2014 EDG to that, and Clear Love is a country mile long. But he is one of the most interesting players to really consider because for him to be a jungler for so long and have like so little jungle pressure is.
Are we gonna have a Clear Love episode? Oh, we're gonna have a Clear Love
I
episode.
feel like we have a Clear Love segment every episode where we talk about what weird things has Clear Love done.
I'm going to structure it for you.
I
want to structure it for you. So Papa Smithy now did our little intro about talking about Clear Love's achievements, because honestly, when you mention Clear Love, especially to a Western audience, and maybe an analyst named Monte Cristo, because I know how much he really loves Clear Love, there's a lot of eye rolling. There was a lot of kind of like, why is Clear Love? Why would you ever bring up Clear Love in one of the greatest players of all time? Like, why would he ever fit into any sort of conversation about that? And so, Kelsey, you actually, I don't know if your article released yet or if it's pending on release, but you've been working on...
It just came out,
It just came out? Okay, so perfect. But the premise is that you identify how Messiah and Clear Love kind of flipped the relationship between jungler and mid on its head. So, in detail, like, can you give me the breakdown of why we value Clear Love or why we don't value Clear Love?
So, I think that if you talk about Clear Love as a jungler, you can't rate him very highly. And a lot of people will say, well, in solo queue he does this, and he's crazy, and he's in every lane, and he ganks like this, and people in Korea call him free win because the Koreans actually want to duo with him because he's always in the top 10 of the Korean solo queue ladder, and he's a really great jungler. But in the professional games, it just doesn't happen, or it does maybe like 10% of the time. And you can kind of make the argument that it's like at the good times where he'll have the jungle pressure and he'll go to the lane and he'll gank and he'll snowball it out of control. But with Messiah was known as this Twisted Fate player, or he would pick up Mobies, and he was never really the 1v1 kind of mid laner. So when you get to these Froggen versus Messiah debates at the time, which I think were really popular, of course, if you're talking about an isolated 1v1 context, Froggen will win that every time. But the map pressure that Messiah was able to exert and almost be this more supportive force that got Wei Xiao ahead and allowed Clear Love to kind of do his thing and farm without actually having to worry about being a jungler. He then came out as maybe this tiny hidden carry just in case Wei Xiao had a bad game, or sometimes they would even build compositions about Clear Love. I know when I was talking to Papa Smithy, he brought up this really crazy composition with Zed Jungle.
Oh,
yeah. That actually had a 3-1 win rate, I think, for all the times that they ran it.
It's like Zed Jungle was brought up by Insect. Like he was the one that did it at their first. Was it CJ Entus? I don't even know which team he was on. It might not have even been the Bullets yet. It might have been CJ Entus.
It
was CJ Entus at an IEM. He put out the Zed Jungle back when the base damage on E was really high, so you could like power clear really impressively. So, I mean, Clear Love brought it over, and kind of the genius to me was that like World Elite they weren't big on taking turrets early. That's one of the reasons why when we start talking about OMG and how that strategy worked so well against World Elite. But I mean, they loved long laning phases. This was back at the time where Season 2, you gave enough AD carry items to your AD carry. He could pretty much hard carry like in another game perhaps, but like Dota, like in terms of the hard carry role, it was definitely closer to that time, at least, than it has been subsequently. So they would extend the laning phase. Like Wei Xiao would like be 2-3-0 in lane, like they'd be winning, and you have a big CS value lead, but they wouldn't take the turret. They'd hold the turret, and they literally wouldn't group until there was like Blade the Ruined King, Brutalizer, Last Whisper on Zed. Like to actually wait for an item timing like that is like unheard of in League of Legends now, where starting your dragon timers, like getting on top of neutral objectives is so important, let alone getting the outer ring of turrets and getting wards down. But that was never a concern for World Elite. I mean, just farming up the Zed was kind of there in those 4 games especially, and it was really effective. It just what they were doing well at the time, no one had an answer to. Like you go back and read those articles by Clement Chu, or you listen to him on Summoning Insight. It was just literally a case that Wei Xiao would use his ultimate, the Ezreal ultimate, to trim waves across the map, and just no one was talking about that. No one understood why he was doing it. Like the fact that he was trimming it and not completely wiping out a wave almost went unnoticed. Like I wasn't talking about it until I really started reading those articles and seeing that like they were just playing the game on a level that previously the game hadn't been played upon. They were ahead of the meta, that's for sure.
Do you think that this was genius of... obviously, there's players in League of Legends, Wei Xiao, Froggen, Faker, that are credited with kind of innovating their specific position or their lane or a specific playstyle that's attributed to them. Do you think this was a genius of Wei Xiao as far as wave manipulation and things like that, or do you think this was Aaron, the coach, now coach of EDG? I mean, we go back as far as 2012 when World Elite wins trophies and they're pulling Aaron onto the stage, and yet, the Western world can't quite catch up to finding the same support or structure for their coaches, or I guess respect for the coaches. But I mean, do you think that's a...
Aaron got a lot of plaudits around the time for Coach Aaron. Whenever they were talking about the 6-man strategy, he was the one that definitely was credited, and I'm inclined to agree that it probably was an out-of-the-game force. It didn't feel like it was just Wei Xiao coming up with something on the fly. It was obviously a lot of team discussion around it. I guess my question always with Aaron is that, we all saw 2013 in World Elite where he was still involved, and it wasn't the same. Like, was it just that he had no answer for the change in meta? Was it just that he was limited to one amazing set of strategies and just couldn't deal and be reactive? I don't know. Like, that's kind of where the questions come up with me about Aaron, because obviously reinvented himself on EDG, had a wonderful 2014, but 2013 was not a good time for World Elite. And we'll get to that later, obviously.
Well, I want to pose this question to Raz and Kelsey, because they're a little bit more familiar with like the birth of EDG and things like that. So now that we've kind of covered the general basis of like World Elite strategy, or broken that down when they were at, kind of the dominant force, do you guys see any overlap of World Elite strategy to EDG? And do you think that has anything to do with Aaron as their coach?
I think, maybe to an extent, but you talk about the shot callers for EDG and WE during 2014, which were FCCF and to an extent Clear Love, and then you had Wei Xiao on WE after Messiah retired. And both of those teams still tried to play really long games. So I don't know if it was necessarily just Aaron's influence, but some of the things that EDG did was less about keeping the waves and more about just playing conservatively, and I think team design and setting up the roster with these particular strengths and these particular picks to control the team fighting in the late game. So in ways it was really, really similar, but at the same time it did have some adaptability to it, and I think that this is where a lot of Clear Love's strengths really shined through, because you saw a lot more of those assassin junglers in early 2014 that weren't just like the Nunu and the Hecarim pick that were the Evelyns and the Kha'Zixes, and so you had that interaction, and the fact that Yu was just a really good team fighting mid laner. He didn't really have the map pressure of Messiah, but he could play like those AoE picks, and he could clear waves really effectively. So when it gets down to it, EDG was a very similar team to, I think, what WE wanted to be. And still through 2013. I think some of the issues that WE had in 2013 were really internal drama related, and those were still focused around Aaron, for sure. Some of the things that started coming out about him, some of the arguments on the team internally.
There was a lot of rumors and innuendo, I remember, around the time they left the team after WCG. A lot of things were levied towards him, but he still kept himself very prominently in the scene after all that drama.
And Clearlove and FCCF were obviously very loyal to him. Followed him when he left the team to Edward Gaming. So it comes to the point where how much of WE struggles were their inability to keep up with the meta, how much of those were individual player based, and how much of those were just the drama. So.
I mean, we don't have a lot of insight into the mentality things, because, I mean, I remember, so obviously the Stars War League Season 2, for those that don't remember, was, I believe, between 2012 and 2013. I think it finished in 2013. It was like during the off-season of OGN, and that was, if you look back at it, like the amount of top talent that was in that tournament that's still around today, or like is revered, as Hall of Fame talent, is really impressive. So, of course, World Elite and Invictus Gaming were in there. There was MVP Ozone, a few of the MVPs even. There was quite a few of those back then. Now Samsung, obviously. A lot of the Samsung talent there. Just top teams around Korea and China. It was a wonderful tournament. The Invictus Gaming beat World Elite 3-2 in the final from memory. And then there was a lot of drama around what happened after that result. I don't know how much you guys remember about, like, I forget, Invictus Gaming did something outrageous after they won. Maybe, like, gave away the money or something. There's plenty of drama. Very delicious stuff if you're into, like, big rivalries, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember the details of that, Kelsey?
I don't remember exactly what outrageous things Invictus Gaming did.
I think PDD probably said something silly like a lot of
I can't remember if this was Star Wars or not, where the owner said something like, "Congratulations, World Elite," without realizing that Invictus Gaming won. So that kind of became a meme. So everyone, because a lot of WE fans obviously interpreted that maliciously, right? So that kind of became a meme that now every time someone wins a tournament, it's just congratulations, World Elite.
Because, I mean, right after that tournament, even though they lost, like, we led just into IPL 5, which is probably the time, like, all of us will remember World Elite at the pinnacle of their strength. And that was when, I remember I was talking to Monte Cristo before the tournament, because I knew he was flying over to Carsten. I'm like, all right, I've been watching World Elite since Enter the Dragon. I guarantee they're going to win this tournament, and they won't even drop one map. And I wasn't right, but they got pretty damn close.
They were really strong. But, like, one thing that actually came to mind, too, is that, like, I'm pretty sure Western audience actually got a glimpse of them before IPL 5 during, I could be wrong, San Francisco Showdown, like IPL Showdown. And they had a poor showing, but there was a lot of, like, discussion on, of course, some of the players. And at the same time, like, they suffered from jet lag, and they had that real bad, like, slump in that sense. But, like, beforehand and afterwards, they were seen as, like, a really powerful force, so it was just an uncharacteristic loss. And so it perhaps teams in NA really, when they saw that, they were like, oh, well, we can handle that, Chinese teams. Because they didn't do the research at that time. That was the only research that they had available to them, because that's what they cared for.
So now we've now reached IPL 5. Let's go into IPL 5 and just quickly cover it. Like you said, it was probably the most... Yes, Kelsey?
The most glorious tournament
Oh, yes.
that ever existed.
Everyone always credits IPL as the best tournament. Tell me why IPL is credited as the best tournament.
I mean, the format was so rigorous. Like, there
And what
was
the
like...
format?
I can't even do it justice. I'm not the best at the like, it was the double elimination, best of fives all the way. Like, it was just so many games, that tournament. And you could even say fatigue, right? Like, in terms of how many games were being played. Like, you can probably pull it up on
It was,
League or something.
yeah. I think
It was best of 3 double elimination, I thought. But the group stage was... They played games until someone won 2. I think until 2 teams won 2 in each of the groups, if I remember correctly.
Like for the completionists of the world, like a Thorin, for example, like that tournament, like it was almost inarguable at the time that World Elite were the best team in the world. Not everyone was there. Like I think Najin Sword wasn't there, and there were a couple of top teams that didn't make it. But it was almost as exhaustive a tournament as you could have to find out the best team in the world at that point in time.
And
It
just
happened.
the amount of, I mean, the difference between W's games, and we talk about how they're really, really long format games. They extend laning phases, but against some of the teams in that group stage, even against Fnatic, like the first game that they played against Fnatic against group stage, they were taking an inhib at like 20 minutes, right? So, I mean, just the way they commanded a lot of those games was ridiculously impressive.
So give me the narrative of World Elite through IPL 5. You started with Fnatic.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, was
I
it
think,
was it was it like that the whole way through, Kelsey? What was
I don't know.
the standout? What was
Well, obviously they stumbled
Okay.
against Fnatic towards the end, but that final series, right, between WE and Fnatic, Fnatic won the first game in that final best of 5, and everyone thought, okay, the previous, because in the upper bracket, obviously WE faced Fnatic again. I think they played a total of like 8 games. Fnatic had just WE and Fnatic.
They played a lot like, in
And-
group stages throughout. It was like, okay, this match happened so often.
So for me, the storyline started out with, okay, WE beats Fnatic. I don't think Fnatic was even hyped up as like the most impressive team going into this tournament. Like we still had Moscow 5 and CLGEU, and the question was a little bit, can Fnatic keep up? And Fnatic, I think, was also even a breakout story in a way at this tournament. I don't remember specifically, but
Was it the debut of Reckless, maybe?
yeah,
It
it
was.
was reckless.
In fact, I think they weren't even supposed to be at the tournament. It was a surprise thing because they like at a previous EU tournament, Fnatic did really well, and I think there was a certain team that couldn't come. I forget exactly that it was a while back, but they were able to fill that slot. I could be wrong in that sense, but like Fnatic came in, they were actually performing really well, which was a big thing for Fnatic, just simply because that team, of course, they didn't qualify for Worlds, and they were they were visibly at a slump, but they actually picked it up, and yeah, that was basically it. And also, we saw like the rematch for CLG versus World Elite.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
redemption right there. That was,
The thing right there is that they beat both Moscow 5 and CLGEU in the first round of the bracket. So those teams were gone. And then they in their group stage face off against Fnatic. It just seemed like they wouldn't have trouble against Fnatic, I think. But at the same time, on the other side of the bracket, Fnatic tore through a TPA. If I remember, I forget. I think CLG, right?
they actually almost lost to CLG. I remember that. That was my favorite set, actually. It's Fnatic versus CLG, because at that time I was still like a massive NA fanboy. Massive. But it was like
You're
CLG.
not? What? Hello?
Okay, more so then. But like,
What are you talking about? He keeps trying to turn the show into EU talk.
oh
I know,
god.
right? Okay.
It's always good to create that like context.
I wanted
and-
like a short narrative, and you guys are just like now we're talking about like CLG. What? Come
It's
on,
the
Raz.
greatest
It was-
tournament
it
that
was
was
so
ever.
good. Yeah, it was
Remember,
a
we're
while
talking about a tournament that was like November of 2012. Like we're diving deep, but it was a very memorable tournament. Like I think at that point, that was when you could really put on your WE flair and say, "Yep, they're the best team in the world." And like there would be pockets of people that would disagree with you, but with all like the fact that we were casting, Julian and I, FaceTime and I did so many tournaments, the World Elite, first, second, like there was so. The thing also that you have to realize is like World Elite probably had the most experience in a best of 3 or a best of 5 format of any team in the world. Like they were playing those long sets in all these tournaments, and best of 1 was like the standard in other regions. Like their adaptive play, like their experience in playing over long sets was ahead of its time for sure.
How hard did WE abuse like Rengar in that tournament?
Oh yeah, the good days of the Rengar. It was Rengar top, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good times.
So now
Oh,
we
God.
have the decline and the rise of now like kind of the current LPL teams. So we're going to talk about now the decline of World Elite into the rise of OMG, and of course then we have to talk about positive energy and extension of that. So
Let's not talk about positive energy. That was a weird final series, let me tell you.
So, Thorne actually made a statement that I thought was really interesting, talking about OMG and their dominance and how he credited them a lot with the fact that they created a style that kind of upset China. Like, no one had quite figured out what to do, and OMG kind of found this different answer. So kind of cover with me through, like, I don't know who wants to take it, Raz, Kelsey, Papa, OMG, who are they, where did they come from, the rise of them, and what happened when they came up? Anyone?
Gotta give it to Kelsey, the encyclopedia here.
The historical context master.
Come
Yeah.
on, OMG fan.
Okay.
Kelsey,
so,
who are they? Where did they come from?
Wow. Okay, calm down.
Kelsey, we need this.
Kelsey,
We need this.
you talk to
The
me about this
original-
every night, please.
OMG, the original OMG player was obviously Going. They picked up Noah's Ark, which I'm not sure at the time this roster was having a lot of problems, but it had Tabe at times. I think PYL was already gone at this point, but it had Tabe, Whites, it had Cool, and most importantly Cool. And so
Pomelo?
they kind
Is he still there?
I don't think
She
Pomelo
said
was on
she used the word
Noah's Ark.
important.
Ah, yes.
I
His
don't- I
Blitzcrank
don't
was pretty
remember-
good.
I don't remember if Pomelo was on Noah's Ark when they bought them. Maybe they did. Maybe he was. I can't remember when he joined the team, but they kind of decided to build the new OMG roster a little bit around Going and Cool.
Oh yeah, apparently PL did leave before
Yeah.
it was acquired. Okay.
They acquired the roster.
Such a
Um,
shitty time.
And so those were kind of the core players. And again, we're talking about the context where everyone picked Ezreal all the time. Everyone wanted to be Wei Xiao, right? And so they picked up these two players. Loveling and Cool actually knew each other, and Pomelo all knew each other before. They played this MOBA before League of Legends. There was this group of players, and I won't go too deep into this, that kind of knew each other from that. So Cool, Loveling, and Pomelo were part of that group. They ended up picking up San as well. And this was the team at the time. It was
Okay.
Loveling was like the master tactician support player, right? But the thing that made OMG work at this time is while everyone was still playing that extended laning phase and worrying about the minions and all this stuff, OMG just kind of took all of that and they picked it up and then they like threw it. I don't know what they
The word is
decided
the
to
pick comp,
die
right?
caps.
They-
Yeah,
they popularized the pick comp for sure, especially in China. Like every time we cast our games, it'd be the same story. Take out those outer three turrets. Pomelo and the rest of the members get some wards in, and they go for the sick hooks with Blitzcrank. That was pretty much their calling card.
And it's really funny when you talk about this now and
Exactly, it's simple. That's pick play, but like again,
and
just
not-
like the
not
six
even
man
just
and
that,
wave
but-
control, it's new. It was very new at the time.
not even just that, but when we look at OMG now, they don't understand vision control.
Mm.
But at that time, like OMG was actually pretty good at like this early vision, putting it down, setting up these plays. Like you think about the Chinese aggression as almost mindless, right? And in a way, it is without vision. But if you take the time to set up the wards, you get the picks. You become really good at this tower dive sort of play, and you can punish teams really easily for that if they want to do an extended laning phase.
Mhm.
So.
Okay, so OMG come in, they have this completely new style of play, and what happens?
They don't completely destroy everyone, but I think that they're effective enough, and we start to see WE almost destroying themselves because they can't necessarily win games. And it's actually Invictus Gaming who kind of has a little bit of a heyday here, just by virtue of
So we have the two.
of Invictus Gaming being less already doing some of this surprising style.
So we have the two main storylines, or the two main teams in our storyline. We've got World Elite and Invictus Gaming. Now OMG comes up. They're starting to add a little bit more to the mix. World Elite falling apart either due to internal drama, shifts in meta. We don't quite understand the full background context there. IAG, little random, have their shining moment. Positive energy. Someone give it
Positive
to me.
energy.
Positive energy. Originally kind of the B team of World Elite, World Elite IROX. Get picked up by Positive Energy. If you look at that roster, their solo laners are... Well, one of them is playing top lane for World Elite right now.
The famous
yeah.
Aluka.
Yeah.
He has an LPL
He's an LPL
title.
champion.
Exactly.
I say that sometimes on a cast. It's
Yeah.
very illustrious.
That guy is an LPL champion.
You want to talk about achievements? I mean, we were talking about
You wanna talk-
Aluka.
You want to talk about demeaning the worth of a
How many LPL
accomplishment.
championships does Wei Zhao have, huh?
Oh man, it hurts me.
I believe I can use the most recent quote is if you don't have a title, you're a shitter.
It was an OGN, so all these players
If you
were
don't
talking
have
about.
if you don't have an OGN title, you're a shitter. So technically, everyone in China's fucked.
I don't know. I mean, we've seen some roster changes, like Deft's in there.
This
Oh,
is
there we
true.
go.
We do have OGN title winners in China.
Exactly.
EDG.
But all the
We've got
players
world
that we're
champions in
talking
NA
about
too.
so
Like
far.
it's a different world now. It definitely
It's a
is.
better world until they get benched.
Okay.
Ouch.
Yeah, so what are we even talking
We
about?
were talking.
So,
I keep
positive
trying to
energy,
like
like-
direct you guys, and you're like, I
Positive
don't really want
energy.
to talk about it. Positive energy.
LPL in general, like 2013 LPL, right? Like people were not interested in the LPL because they thought World Elite were going to walk it. Like if you remember at this time, this is just as the first league is coming, the big first professional league in China, they thought World Elite's going to walk it. IG's going to really push it to them, but there was little to no interest in the league because it was thought to be so top heavy. So just the fact that Invictus Gaming topped the league was a surprise. The fact that World Elite were third, I mean, there wasn't a lot. There was a win between first and second, and a win between second and third. So it was really close standings for the top three teams. But I mean, it was a surprise that World Elite didn't walk that league, and it was definitely the beginning of the end. Because especially against OMG, their strategies. It was the exact perfect strategy to counter the long laning phase, the early grouping, the early map movement, the picks, and focusing on structures and wards to get more picks. Like World Elite, they had so many times to try and they had a lot of time. They played each other a lot of times during the series. They just never developed a strategy to work against it, and that's why they fell away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even to say that, I think OMG even won their games against Invictus Gaming. It's just that as the league started to pick up this type of much earlier strategy, Invictus Gaming was already accustomed to it, so they didn't necessarily drop games to some of the smaller teams. Like I think the beginning of they dropped one of their Zed jungle games to LMQ, and I can't remember if this was summer or spring, but I think that was kind of painful.
Was it Livermore? Was it Livermore back then?
Livermore.
Because I don't think LM.
Yeah, LMQ wasn't a thing until summer. That's right.
Yeah, there was all sorts. There was shakeout jungles coming out of like Wings of Aurora. There was all sorts of things happening. All those orgs are like dead now, which is sad times. But positive energy. To answer your original question, that was back in the time where you go on Reddit and people are like, "Who's the best AD carry in China?" And like, obviously Wei Zhao had a lot of popularity, but there was always this pocket. Whenever the Chinese fans would like put their heads in, they would say it's Devil. It's that Devil guy.
They'd always
and
say
like,
Devil.
they would always say Devil. It was always Devil number 1, Wei Zhao number 2 kind of thing. Or even Uzi number 2 back then. He had a lot of fans as well. But Devil was always number 1.
And at the time, Devil... Well, yeah, she says, now.
Huh.
But at the time, Devil, he was a little bit of a shit talker then too. But
So
he used to say things like, "I will beat Wei Xiao," and I think that added a lot of tension and intrigue to the positive energy WE storyline. And because they used to be sister teams, it was kind of taken more in stride. But
So this Devil guy, whatever happened to him?
I believe he's in prison at the moment. So
Never
he's
heard of him
about to
again.
be.
I think he
like,
actually
I just wish there
got-
was English language
He's
like
about to-
translations of the like LPL Twitch chat. I know that doesn't exactly map to one-to-one, but free Name should be all
Free
over
Name,
there.
yeah.
Like Dyrus being in jail. I mean, Name's
You just-
basically in
you just
jail. Let's be
ruined
real.
the punchline.
Yeah.
I think everyone already knew by now,
What?
actually.
No,
Yeah, I
I'm
think-
sure
I
there
think
was
we're
someone
not
in
very
the
good
chat
at-
that was like,
It's like, who's this devil
person's
guy?
like, oh,
Who's
why'd
this
you jump
devil
to the
guy?
end? I'm sorry,
But
team.
no.
Dang.
Obviously, the joke is that devil is Name, which
Mhm.
ironic
Like,
because
really
now
obvious
the
it's a
the
joke.
argument is, at least according to Reddit, like if you're talking about best AD carry, Devil's not even on that list.
Yeah, people
Well, he
are
didn't
quick to forget.
He didn't
Hmm?
really have like a UZI storyline yet. He's still.
But would you say Devil is? I mean, like Devil and Name do feel like split personality. Though they're not the same. I almost like. Is it wrong that my one hope for the LPL is that March? Is it March 13 that he's supposed to be coming back? Something like that.
Yes.
I just really
have
hope, I'm
countdown.
sitting there, I'm waiting for the people to load into lobby, and all I want to see,
Is the
everything in the
devil.
world, the one thing I want to see,
just want a
SHRC
new
Devil.
devil.
I literally will like drop the mic and
That
need to
would be
console myself.
so
That is
sick.
what needs to happen. Like
Return
that's,
to Devil. That's kind of what
it doesn't
I.
need to be Name anymore. There doesn't need to be any consistency. All-Star Horn Royal Club need
Mhm.
is Devil back. You bring Devil into that team, I'd be so excited.
So why do you make this statement? Is there?
See, his identity the identity of the player that he needed to be on Positive Energy was not the identity of the player that Edward Gaming needed. Like, just to expand on that point, like, like, how would you characterize Name as a player in 2014 for EDG? Like, what would you say the Name that's most popular is known as? It wouldn't be aggression, right?
Mhm.
It's
Dude.
the thing about. So I kind of came to this conclusion as we talk about vision and watching Devil/Name throughout the last couple of years. I think he's a very vision-driven player, and when you compare Sika and
FCZF.
FCZF, Sika is a much more vision-oriented support. So setting up, and then kind of in the beginning of 2014, when Name was first joining EDG, there was a little bit of friction, where he would overextend and get caught out, and it was almost like this deft, like, laning phase, right?
Mhm.
Where he would give up some kills. And slowly he kind of adjusted, he became acclimated, and he became much more of this consistent, slow building, late game oriented AD carry. But I think it is because FCZF doesn't do the vision thing, and that's not what EDG needed. So when we talk about AD carries, and why I particularly rank Name so highly is because I feel like he adapts very well to what his team needs.
And like going back to the point of like why he'd be rated, so it was the mechanics. Like his mechanics were always thought to be unparalleled. And this was in a time when the West, all they knew about Chinese AD carries was, Wei Xiao's a god of mechanics. So that was the big thing that always came up, his Ezreal play, his ability to dodge skill shots, some of those VODs you see where he does amazing things. But Name, arguably, it was consensus at the time was he was better mechanically. He was playing on a team with a Luca, which, and Jojo in the mid was
Jojo, yeah.
okay, but he wasn't like any sort of superstar. Their best player outside Name was Jing, their jungler, who...
Oh, come on, Sika. Sika's
Okay, well,
glorious.
at that time, I think Jing was more important to their
Jing-
identity. The moment Jing left, like, that team fell apart
I want to throw that
really
on this.
fast.
Okay, here we go.
Here we go. Jungler versus support.
Jing's Xin Zhao was godly. Come on now.
I can see your point. Oh, we're ranking people on their.
That's my only criteria. I didn't see Sickers, so easy.
Mhm.
One in the bag.
Was Sika's Xin Zhao better? Kelsey.
Wait, Sika's a support.
Kelsey.
Where was
Jinx.
Answer.
I didn't get to see him play Zhao, but without even knowing, I know the answer is yes. No. I see where you're going with the Jing thing, and I agree. Jing was, especially at the time in China, one of
Jing made JoJo look good. Let's be real here. Like, I think people were even I was tricked into thinking that JoJo was a pretty good mid laner. So when they lost Name, I was like, well, they'll fall away, but like JoJo seems okay. He's still there, and
So he's
Nope.
like the
I'll
ex-Smithy
give you
of
the-
China.
like the 3 games that Positive Energy won they won 4 games, I think, in spring of 2014, and 3 of those were on JoJo. One of those was when YCC went ham on Twitch Jungle, but we'll,
yeah, that's Twitch
we'll
jungle. Huh?
we'll say JoJo had the power to carry them for 3 games.
It's just, I didn't even appreciate that Positive Energy made the finals of the first LPL split. Obviously won the second one, and then, like,
Great.
what a What a collapse!
that was the
spectacular collapse.
What
that
made
was the
them
upset.
collapse?
I don't know. Maybe they lost. They maybe lost a bottom lane. I'm not sure
Wait, oh,
Yep.
that happened.
Did Sika play for them a
see-
bit during 2014 spring? Am I wrong on that?
I think so. I'm pretty sure he played.
They lost a certain devil, that's for sure.
this is my favorite game to play. It's anytime Name comes up and we're talking about his accomplishments, it's always to, like, really underline them. So this is the running motif and
Okay,
theme
and look,
with
I can get
Name.
behind that. It's just, don't you feel like the story needs we need to know what happens with him on Star Royal Club to complete the thought. Because it's so easy to say, all right, he was on positive energy, he needed to be aggressive, excellent laning phase, excellent mechanics. Like, his accomplishments there, like what he did with that team, you know, whether you want to rate Jing or not, whether you rate Sika or not, like, he was by far the star of that team.
Yeah.
And, like, propelled them to heights that they, like, literally fell off a cliff the moment he left. So, like, I'm happy to give him a lot of shine and a lot of attention for that.
If
And,
he
like,
had performed at Worlds, he wouldn't need this.
sure.
This is the,
Yeah.
But I mean, he didn't perform at Worlds, and
exactly.
like, he performed. His China performance in 2014 was wonderful. Like, his domestic performance was great, but I feel like he needs to rise like a phoenix. I need to see Devil or a name change, and him to come onto the Starhorn Royal Club that has no. Like, the amount of wins Starhorn Royal Club have this season is, like, unbelievable that they have so many wins. With,
I know,
like, basically
actually.
a fill-in 80 carry. They've taken like 3 2-0s, which is like they would have expected pre-Name to take, you know, like a few draws here and there, but, like,
Yeah.
it's almost unbelievable how many points they have, and they're just primed, you know, a couple of weeks to get him to settle in, and, like, if he can be the carry that team needs, like, I feel like the narrative writes itself. It's almost like one of those sports movies, right? Like, he has the potential to really be the hero that you guys need just to
Exactly.
propel this show even higher. The Name hype will
Please,
be
Name.
all over there. Okay, let's have a side bet. Will he come back as Name, or will he name change?
I hope to
played
God
in-
he comes back as
played in
Devil. That would be amazing.
Oh god, it'd be
was
so good.
around.
God, it has to be. It's gonna be. I feel like it's gonna be Name, but my heart's telling me Devil. Like, I really, really want him to come
He's
back.
gonna
with
do
Devil.
something, like, totally out of the box. He's gonna come back with a name change. It's just gonna be right.
He's gonna come back as
I get it because easy.
Oh, you got that one?
Okay. Oh, good. No,
Yeah, you guys are like this.
I'm an idiot.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it's
let's continue.
Okay.
No, it's so I actually wrote an article about this before I
Oh,
heard
did you?
that Name was not going to be starting right away, and then my heart just, like, sunk and I was depressed. But he actually, by not performing at Worlds, set up the UZI versus Name debate. So the question becomes, like, can he adapt in Starhorn Royal Club with a support who, like, has a lot of the same elements of aggressive play and playmaking that Sika has, but not so much the vision aspect. And so that's kind of where I see where he would fit here. And I was really excited for, like, the swag with the Zero and the Devil bot lane. If some of Name's shit talking could come back, you know, then, like, and Zero getting
Oh my
this
God.
personality.
That's so good for shit talking. If Name and Zero would just shit talk together, especially against OMG.
Exactly.
Alright,
Oh
you guys
my
don't
God.
know this, but Zero is the biggest troll in Champ Select ever.
No,
Really?
he's such
I don't know
a
if you
troll.
guys saw this, but he's such a troll. Like, there's games which, like, the games are delayed because he invites, like, intermediate bots in instead of letting people join. It's so funny. He's
Yeah.
such a troll. He's such a troll.
He's very much like when he first came over, he was polite. He let, like, the Chinese community troll him. Like, when he saw Pomelo, they asked him, like, who is that player, you know, like, in the game client. And they said, oh, that's SK Telecom T1K6 member. And he's like, oh, okay. He just kind of went along with this
Yeah.
kind of thing. But now he's just getting this, like, bigger personality, and I think that it was, like, this almost climbing to Worlds, and you could see it in some of his Worlds interviews, and he was getting this sort of moxie, and then UZI left, and he was a little bit sad, and he had on Facebook, if I had just been a better support, maybe you would have stayed.
I mean, his performance was never in doubt. He was wonderful at Worlds.
the
That's
carry
why
of the team.
seeing him with these, like, sub 80 carries is like, depressing. Like you
Yeah,
just
it's really
know.
depressing.
But I mean, the thing that I've embraced, because like it's not interesting talking about Starhorn Royal Club as a team when they don't have Nami, because it's like they're basically like working the clock down, getting as many points as they can before they get their settled lineup. And it's a long season, so it's like fine to an extent. But it's like the most interesting thing to me is, you know, Corn and Cola. Can they step up and actually be carries with their gold? Like, can they take a lead advantage and take an advantage in lane and then translate that into carry performances? Because eventually you'll have a bot laner, an AD carry who, however you want to rate him, is a top tier AD carry. So what they can do with the rest of the gold, like Name doesn't, or at least hasn't historically demanded all the gold like Uzi. So theoretically, there's more gold available. These guys have some practice, in this downtime, if you will, trying to use that gold and carry themselves. Insects going into a shot calling role and struggling a lot of the way, but getting there. Like theoretically, if those two can step up, like there's a lot for Name to walk into, and at least in points total, they'll feel pretty happy with their start.
And the story...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Storyline... Sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say the storyline with Corn and Cola last summer was, I kind of consider Star Wars Club a simmering team right now, and what I mean by that is that Corn and Cola had really big champion pool issues coming into 2014 summer.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Cola in particular was known as a Jackson Shyvana player, and those characters kind of got a nerf pretty early on into the split, and then suddenly he was trying to play this Gragas, and then Gragas got nerfed. So he just couldn't find, and he really only showed up, I think, like a little bit in playoffs, and then really on the world stage when he played this Aurelia that he came out with, when he picked up this Rise, and he looked pretty respectable, and even the Dr. Mundo. Corn, he didn't really have this huge impact. He always had this really, really high KDA because he would kind of be scared and he would sit in lane. And he would have this Yasuo that he could go off on, but people would ban it against him really consistently. And he played LeBlanc before, but then LeBlanc got the nerf and people weren't playing it. But then he picked up Orianna and Fizz. And those were the champions that he could play for a while. And this didn't come out, and this was the thing that I think made Starhorn Royal Club from like a top 4 team to a top 3 team, like a team ready to go to Worlds. Outside of WE once again plummeting and imploding, is that he managed to get these champions. In second, Korn managed to get the synergy and getting his lane going sometimes, and the gold distribution, not so much gold because I didn't have a very good way of tracking that, but the kill distribution went from so heavily UZI favored to a little bit more on Korn during these two games, or 2 best of 2s where they 2-0'd EDG and then 2-0'd OMG. So I thought that was very interesting, and that's kind of like when the team exploded a little bit and started to look like a really strong contender.
And it really, for me, showed the strength of, I would say, coaching staff in that sense. Because while you saw World Elite start to fizzle, and it really came down to a lot of people realizing that maybe World Elite didn't understand their own problems in that sense. Their solution would be like, oh god, we're not doing so well. Let's import more Koreans, or like, B-tier Koreans. Or,
I know it'll fix this. Ninja.
Ninja. We have it. We've got it. But then,
I'm just so disappointed that roster was so good.
Yeah.
Okay.
But with I just want to say, with Starhorn Road Club, they knew what their problems were in that sense. Going into Worlds, they were like, well, we're focusing too much gold onto UZI, and so they started to really incorporate their lanes into it, like Corn and Cola. And at first, everyone was going into Worlds thinking, well, Corn and Cola, they're not good at all. Like, well, at least they have their problems. They can go into certain champions and they can perform well. Like, for instance, Corn would have his Fizz, or even Orianna, but it wasn't necessarily something to like bat an eye at. You're not going to be scared about that. But they really, of course, they went into Worlds, they did well, but now, in this split, they've shown like that they can carry their load, or at least specifically Cola.
At least Cola.
Yeah,
Cola has been
Yeah.
really good.
Cola's been
Corn has
Corn's-
been
Corn's iffy, but
struggling.
Well, I mean, his Oriana and Fizz are like basically gone with the changes. Like Ori's like out of the meta at the moment, and then Fizz is definitely not a mid champion anymore, at least with the current numbers. So, I mean, look, he's got time. He's got another month theoretically, or a couple of weeks. He's just got to find something. He needs another 2, just 2. That's all we ask. Just 2 champions, please.
He's been trying out that Cassidon though.
I have faith.
Is that we covered like Wei Xiao and we covered Name, but as soon as like we never even covered UZI storyline, and then one time he comes up, it's like Starhawk Roller Club has this problem where they put too much gold on. Like you immediately just called him a problem. Like we did everything in our power to just kind of like sidestep this.
I don't know about you guys. I think Uzi is a great player.
I think he is.
I think his mechanics are wonderful. I think you remember Joe Miller calling some of those moves at Worlds. His Worlds performance, like he's a clutch player. I think is the big thing about him. It's just people confuse a clutch player with like a consistent player that's always at the top of their game, and that hasn't been his play over like if you watch all the Chinese tournaments, like he has peaks and troughs of performance by sure, but there's always place for someone who turns it on at Worlds, right? Like you can't take away how great his performance has been at 2 Worlds in a row. You look at his OMG performance, it's been especially lately, there's been a lot of random Vayne picks and just dying all over the place, which I can't really interpret. But
that's
I mean, Deft versus Uzi, I'm still super excited about like a Friday, right? Like that's such a big game coming up this weekend.
My favorite. I will be shocked if they pick Vayne in that series. My
really?
thing about
I would.
Yeah, I will.
I would. I kind of expect a lot of Sivir because I think their use of Sivir has been really good, or at least
I think
for
they'll
them
pick.
special.
They like picking
pick
Sivir comps
Kalista.
than knocking in Vayne. They're good at picking like amazing comps for Sivir and then be like, oh yeah, Uzi just play Vayne, whatever. I'm like, and their comps. They're
If
good at that.
Kalista is left open, that's
That works.
first pick worthy for them.
Wait. Before we even get into OMG and EDG, there was like a big purpose to this. There's a purpose to like the setup of like the narratives and like
for
walking
EDG.
through World Elite.
Yeah,
IG.
you can have your purpose. We're gonna have our segues.
Such
Thanks very much.
changes,
And the purpose is we have this big match of like EDG versus OMG coming up, and there's not actually really a narrative here. I mean, like you could make the narrative that these are like the 2 most dominant teams in LPL. This is like rightly the first and second place teams kind of battling out. Although this split OMG, it's almost a little bit questionable. Like, is it LGD? Is it OMG? Is it Invictus
That's
Gaming?
the
if they
Chinese
decide to show
rivalry.
up?
Right there is OMG versus LGD. That's the actual rivalry.
Wait, but this is
EDG is just so far above.
so. This is
I
kind
know.
of like what I wanted to talk about it in terms of like narrative, because this is like a big match coming up. We've seen OMG versus LGD. Of course, they split 1-1, and so this call hopefully answers some questions like, is EDG really that far ahead of everyone else? Can OMG do something other than sit in lane and out CS their opponents?
I agree with you. There's a lot of storyline. There's also like the Chinese national team aspect of OMG versus the team that's definitely integrated their Korean imports the best in EDG. Like there's a lot of questions and variables up in the air, but I mean it's a sexy matchup across the across the lanes in terms of sexy is what I'd call it.
Sexy.
Like
It is.
how many of the 10 players in that game have like carry potential or like potentially could be the MVP? Like there's so much that could happen. I just hope it's a good series, right?
MVP Clear Love.
like
Watch
we,
it
we
happen.
talk-
Always.
Out of
Yeah.
all of the names that go into that,
He's just gonna play
Pawn,
Nunu and be
Deft.
the best at being everywhere.
Well,
Let's do
Clearlove's
it.
kill participation on EDG historically has always been the highest. Like he's involved in everything, and the question is just getting him involved earlier. Like that's the trick with Clearlove.
EDG, like, I mean,
how
Clearlove-
early can we get him involved?
Clearlove has been really good this season. Like,
Yeah.
there hasn't been those invisible games. There's been like one. I think Beast like put him in the dumpster basically, but like apart
The
from
snake
that,
games.
yeah, the snake games like he reverted sadly, but he's been really on point with like a whole range of champions as well. Like Nunu coming back definitely helps him because he can put Blood Bowl and his good mate Deft and walk around the map together. That's always
Yeah.
fun. The Jinx Nunu just ambling around the
Just-
Noble Yeti. That's always funny.
the journey
knowing,
around the map.
That's what they
That's-
do, and that works for them, right?
That has historically been an EDG comp that they like to pull out in these like clutch situations, but they've been playing it more and more because
But
I
it's
think
very
Jinx
much
has
changed in its dynamic of like how it works
Exactly.
though.
Because EDG, like, I don't know what you guys think about this, but like, I feel like Pawn opens up so many different strategic options for that team. Like I don't know how highly you rate him, but like I've been really impressed to see them have basically like Pawn being able to initiate from the mid lane on champions like Fizz. Okay, that's out of the meta now, but it feels like EDG can play the early game really well now, and can play the mid game, and can play the late game. Over series, like over a weekend, you'll see them play Protect the Deft and then play a pick comp, and then we'll have a big carry performance from Pawn. Like they have like, so many different gears, and although they're showing the Nunu comp a few times, it feels like they've got a lot of different ideas. So when you come and do scouting for like which EDG is going to rock up against OMG, like I wouldn't want to be the analyst because they've just got so many different game styles they can play, and they've all been really effective.
See, that's what I like about Pawn. Now, obviously, Kelsey's gonna hate me for this, but I think
I don't dislike Pawn.
Okay.
I already had this we already had this conversation
Yeah,
in the
we have.
previous episode.
yeah. But with Pawn, I just like the fact that he's extremely confident. Maybe you is confident. I can't say anything about that, but Pawn's confidence, like, gives him the freedom in the game to choose whatever he wants, to last pick what he wants. So you'll see him like obviously they were going up against. I wouldn't call him competition. Like you see his Veigar, you see his Lux, and you're like, okay, that's like.
But you saw the
can't plan
Veigar, then he
against that.
picked it again. He was just like, all right, yeah.
But
This
you
works
just can't
for us,
plan
guys.
against that. Like, how can you be an analyst or a coach for the team that faces against an EDG that just like picks randomly and still wins based on their superior like map positioning? I
mean,
guess
that's the thing about Pawn is like he's not Corn. He can carry from the mid lane. He will pick like a Zir and then get in there with the Zhonyas and make play. Like he's a playmaker, which they've never had in the mid lane. So that's why I really think it puts them on a different echelon to other teams until OMG can kind of suss out what they're doing. Like OMG's felt a bit aimless like the last 3 or 4 weeks in terms of like their strategies. Their pick and ban has been pretty poor. Like there's been a lot of times when I'm just crying out for a Sivir and then we get Vayne and I'm like, well, okay then, like maybe they'll outplay with the Vayne. Like it's
I don't know.
OMG can always jump to the next level, right? You feel like OMG is just not really. You don't know how much to credit that to OMG and say, oh yeah, they got great players that are just taking it easy, or you don't know whether they do have like severe team comp problems. It's hard to say.
It is. It really is because because I'm gonna probably come in with the lone opinion that I do think OMG is gonna take a game off EDG coming into the week. I'm not gonna say that they're gonna 2-0 them.
What do you think are the variables or the win conditions that need to be met for that to happen?
Laning phases. I think OMG. Well, even in picks and bans, because I do think OMG is gonna
You're
take the
counting
picks
on
and bans
OMG to
very
win,
seriously.
pick and ban?
Or at least just not so much win, but pick correctly or smart. Like
Just don't pick themselves into a corner like they've been
Exactly.
doing recently.
They have a new coach though, yeah?
oh, okay.
A Korean
Yeah, that's
coach?
true. Yeah.
It's debatable how new he is, whether or not he was just announced recently or he's actually been around for a while. Since they've
That's
been very
concerning.
they've been secretive about their
Someone
coach
said something about
selection.
a sports psychologist as well. Like
Yeah, they
they're-
picked up a sports psychologist, which
Wow.
I was much more excited about.
Mhm.
I think it's significant. Like there's integrating
There's-
Uzi into a team's always going to have ego issues, right? So
And just
Yeah.
given the amount of times we've seen OMG get to like that and be that second place position and then like fall apart because there's like this roster issue or they just choke or
See,
I don't know.
That's just the
if
problem
there's a
with
team that's in need of a sports psychologist.
yeah.
OMG.
It would have been Starhorn Royal Club before, clearly, with all the things that came out about Zero and his role on that team, and now it's no coincidence that it's OMG.
So on my
Can we say something
Edward
nice about
Gaming.
Uzi?
I think he's a great player. Okay, I think that it's like the highs and it's just we are a group of people who value consistency probably more than a lot of people who like to see the crazy stuff that he can do like at this top level that almost makes it.
Exactly. That's the thing. If you see snapshots of the top level of Chinese League of Legends, I mean, if you had like a group of highlight videos of the best plays, it's going to be Uzi because like his ceiling is right up there above most players. Like it's right up the top. And the problem is that his floor is also pretty low. Like he can have those bad performances. I don't know if he's picking the vein for himself, but like he can like the champions he ends up on. Like he puts himself on hard spots he doesn't need to. Like when they were playing those like selfless Sivir comps, OMG looked really good at the start of this season. I was like, okay, clearly they've got this sus. They were playing like low damage comps but controlling dragons. Uzi was playing Sivir, doing his role, and that was fine. They mixed it in with a bit of Vayne, and even that was working. But they've just been picking themselves into such odd spots that you have to think something more is afoot here.
Yeah, possibly. Like, I just think that they're probably just trying to figure out what works for them. Because with this kind of season, you just, like, you understand that OMG and EDG probably, they're shoo-in for playoffs. And I feel like
Sure.
with just not so much the culture, but just the idea going around with most teams and players that they just kind of, they coast through the season. But I do think they're going to take this game seriously if by just kind of like, just due to the competition itself. So we're going to see a serious OMG. Well, this is just, at this point, this is just contentious. Like,
you just know that Uzi's going to be looking at the calendar going, yep, I'm going to be right there on the Rift and do it big.
Exactly. So I do think they're going to try
we'll
it.
finally have a 2v2. I was going through all of the VODs to try to find like the big like matchup, and I couldn't find really any game where a big name AD carry faced off against another big name AD carry in a straight lane phase. It was always
LGD and
LGD
and EDG.
Oh,
LGD and EDG had one 2v2. Yeah,
okay,
and Deft got a kill.
One, but like OMG
got a
versus
kill,
LGD,
Jesus.
it was always a lane swap. It was bizarre. Which it's not bizarre if you think about the meta, but.
OMG have been doing a lot of lane swaps to give. Even on Sivir, they would lane swap and have. Yes,
EDG likes the 2v2.
It's just
and
funny because Uzi like historically is all about that 2v2. Like he wants to take it even if he has a losing
Deft
matchup.
is like,
he seems to like the 1v0 in top lane just fine this season.
and Deft, and that's the other thing is Deft. Do you think is like the player that wouldn't want the 2v2? But though, so I disagree a little bit with the pawn thing.
Sure.
I think that the thing that has changed EDG is the fact that they're playing around their AD carry more, and that has made Clearlove more active in the early game. And they kind of have this they have this focus style where Mako does roams, like the support, and he places wards on the side of the map where Deft is and that 2v2 lane is. And Pawn can kind of, he takes these picks like the Vygar to get the picks if the jungle goes anywhere close to Deft at all. And he'll find these picks in these assassinations. Whereas Clearlove is like bottom, and then Clearlove has this, I think he has the highest kill participation at 68.74% kill participation, and then Deft is like 1% behind at like 67%, and then Mako plus Mouse's stats is like all the way down to like 64. So you've got this little bit of variance, and then the Koro and Pawn are often doing their own thing. I think that a lot of it is focused around getting Deft ahead, and that was the big difference we saw between the Snake set, where Deft kind of fell behind really early, and then
they were really roam ganking Deft a lot. Like Deft was dying in lane a lot early.
And if I were
kind of
Snake,
felt
and I've been hard on Snake in the past, and if I were Snake though, and I was looking at this EDG team, I would see Clearlove and Deft have weak early game. First game, they just destroy Deft. Like, they make it their mission to just be in his lane, destroy him over and over again. He goes like 164. Then the second game, they immediately invade Clearlove and mess with him. So I don't know. To me, it was just very. They isolated it, and EDG realized this is where our weaknesses are, and they kind of focused more on we need to help Deft in his laning phase. And I think as a result, he's almost become more of a confident laning player.
Yeah, I think you have to. I think you have to point out that last bit, just because like we're seeing him like win lanes he has no right to.
Right.
Like, just 2v2 winning lanes on Cogmore, for example, which is just like outrageous. And sure, some of that skill differential, but like Deft has been shoring up his laning phase problems, and the team's been helping him out. So he just looks like a superstar between those two things.
The one thing that I want to point out, though, because we've talked now about like Pawn and Deft and Clearlove and how all those pieces are fitting together. In the past, we've talked about Koro and how he's really changed the top lane and kind of come into his own. But we really haven't talked a lot, not even on China Talk in its entirety, about their new support Mako. And we're bringing him up, and I like the fact that this is segueing into the fact that Deft is looking a lot stronger in lane, looking more dominant lane, and I frankly, personally, have been very impressed with Mako as a support, especially because to me, kind of came out as like a no-name. I couldn't figure out who he was, where he came from, or what his background was, but huge on roaming, and I think he's definitely been a solid rock for Deft in that bottom lane there.
Mm-hmm.
He's a support player. No.
Really?
Well, it's the thing, because you go back and Hart used to be a jungler, Mouse used to be a mid laner, I think, so Mako's a support player. I mean, it's kind of a joke, because I think Hart definitely was a support player for sure by the end of his tenure, but I mean, Mako has been really impressive to me, yeah.
And Mako came in, and I think it was, I may have this around the wrong way, but he was playing, I felt like he was playing disengaged supports after the previous support was playing like a lot of Annie and stuff, so it felt like maybe like they wanted to go more disengagey, but then Mako's like, he's playing both, like, you know, both the playmaking and the defensive supports really well, so it has been a significant upgrade, and I've heard like kind of insinuations that the link between him and Deft is a lot stronger than the previous one was. So they're fitting in together well, yeah.
Because it actually reminds me, there's always been a discussion on whether Deft is just a weak laner or not, and it's always been back to, well, it could be the supports, because the discussion is, well, Hart is probably not that strong of a laning support, and same goes with Mouse, and, well, the discussion could be made about Mouse. But, so now it's been proving that Deft can hold his own in the lane, as well as late, like mid-game. So it's really nice to see, and it actually closes up EDG's weaknesses that we've seen them had in the early game. Like, they've had some definite weaknesses in the early game, but that's probably closed out. Won't be as strong as OMG though, but that's neither here nor there.
But here we go, because now it comes to predictions. Obviously, Raz goes for the 1-1.
Yeah.
Papa, what do you think is going to happen? Is OMG going to show a second gear? Is EDG going to 2-0?
I think, as a betting man, OMG are going to take a game. Like, 1-1 was also going to be my prediction. I feel like if OMG make the right adjustments, especially in pick and ban, their ceiling is so high. I think they'll get it together for at least one of the games. But if EDG really gets a big early game, like if Clear Love gets active in one of the games, I don't think OMG will have an answer to bring it back. So, again, it's going to be a snowball away from OMG. But I do see a big performance from them in one of the games. So 1-1 will definitely be my prediction.
I know, I feel like a jerk.
I thought I was coming in with guns blazing as if I was the one cornered, but nope.
No, one of the things that I wanted to talk about when we built up the history of the Chinese rivalries was the illusion of the EDG versus OMG rivalry last year. And the reason why I say it's an illusion is because when we talk about the really strong OMG roster that we saw coming out of the group stage, and 3-0ing Nogent White Shield at Worlds, that roster only ever faced Edward Gaming once. Because every other time they faced Edward Gaming, they had Dada 7. And that roster only ever faced Edward Gaming once, and it was in the first best of 2 of 2014 summer, and they went 1-1. So
I mean, even as a bigger point, like how, like they didn't have Cool for the first half of the year, obviously.
Right.
And then Cool came back, and from what I understand, like people were worried about his performance level at the start. So, like, when did OMG really heat up in terms of actually getting all their ducks in a row, like lineup-wise? Like, even discounting Dada 7 and his struggles, like, when was Cool actually on his game to the point where they looked like the team that had dominated in 2013?
Cool, I don't think ever played like last year, like he played in 2013, and like he's playing now. I think he played really well, and he kind of had glimpses of that ceiling. People bring up the Yasuo game where he went insane, when typically Yasuo wasn't even a champion he had a lot of success on. But for me, it was the Twisted Fate pick, where he could have pressure on the map and he could sort of like control things and be everywhere. That was when Cool sort of started finding himself and getting these picks. And that's when OMG started finding themselves. And he got on that in response to, I think, the LeBlanc falling off. But even, yeah, you bring up a good point that early 2014 summer, OMG just had this roster was brand new, and EDG's obviously wasn't. And EDG had just come off winning 2014 spring. They had just come off winning IET against OMG's other roster. So they were looking really good. And then this OMG roster 2-1-1s them. And part of it was just, and Loveling back on jungle, because he played support again in 2014 spring. So that was a huge thing.
Yep.
And so that was kind of the illusion of the OMG EDG rivalry. And you always kind of thought every time they faced after that maybe it could be like that good and that OMG would be that team. But I think their weakness in their bottom lane was just, it kind of made the entire team drag down a little bit. They had a lot of misplays with like some of the teleports. And it was just thinking about how OMG played in group stage. It's versus how they played against, yeah. Anyway, that is the illusion.
What did I ask you?
But that illusion, I think, is something that we're still clinging to, right?
Okay.
When we talk about OMG versus EDG, and I think it's going to be a 2-0.
Good
For
segue.
EDG.
There we go.
So what about
No,
you,
but that's what I wanted to
Oscarin?
build up.
What's happening?
That was a wind up. That just. I think it's gonna be a 2-0 to EDG.
Okay. So it's even split down.
At some point, I have to raise an important question
Yeah.
to the lovely people we have assorted here, and in particular for Oscarin.
Okay.
How do you feel about your beloved Invictus Gaming becoming the most methodical, slow, like introspective, like playing out their game, no kills, got to really power up to late game team? It's very effective, but
It's getting them wins. That's all I
I've been watching League of Legends and Invictus Gaming for a long time, and they've basically thrown everything out. They've thrown out Zatai. He's in the dumpster. He's on the bench somewhere.
They
It
playing
isn't
solo
even
queue.
just
lit him on
Invictus Gaming.
fire.
He's really doing great in solo queue with all his extra time. Let me tell you, that's Zatai. And Save, I don't even know what's happening with him. He's just chilling somewhere. But
He's playing.
This is,
he's probably playing
it's a
Warcraft with Ackerman.
it is a crazy world where Invictus Gaming is playing the way they are, and I have to know your opinion on what's happening over there.
Save said his best Chinese
Hello,
friend
is your name Frostgren?
is Pokemon, okay?
What?
I heard about that.
All right.
But
God.
Okay.
Oscarin,
so
please,
at
I need to
least-
know. The IG fanboy in here needs to weigh in.
This is my thing. You take the KT Arrows, which were probably my favorite Korean team because my favorite team is Invictus Gaming. You know, like you have to go ham. Like if you're not fucking like flashing Nexus towers, you're not.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of you. I was a big fan of M5. So like that was my Chinese gateway drug. Like they're all about like the world lead. I was like M5, come on, let's go murder some people in the jungle. See hero, kill hero. And then I found Invictus Gaming. I was like, oh my god, they see something on the map and they just rush to it. It
Yep.
doesn't even matter. And
That's why I have to know, because it's not Invictus Gaming. Like, it's Invictus Gaming
I
in
know,
name,
right?
but
Like-
it's the Katie Rolster Gaming or something. I don't know. It's just
It's not
not
even
the
that.
same
Like you
thing.
took the most aggressive Korean team and like the most random Chinese team, and you're like thinking this is gonna be like steroids.
it was for a few weeks too.
And that OMG versus Invictus Gaming game was fucking hilarious.
Oh.
Come on.
But it just
Yeah.
stopped, and now they're
Methodical.
slow.
Methodical Invictus Gaming. That is never a sentence that has ever been publicized anywhere.
Slow and it's like, all right,
It's not
5
even
dragons.
a sentence. It's just 3 words that shouldn't be together.
I'm not even
For
gonna
that
lie.
team-
I ejected so quickly on that. I saw that Rookie was like winning lane on like Cassiopeia, and I was like trying to find the button. I was like, "Where's King? King, please, King!"
I feel like with IG, they've changed, of course, obviously, like, to, wait, we need to kill the Nexus to, or at least we need to kill champions to 5 dragons. If we don't get 5 dragons, we're not ending this game. 5 dragons and
We
we're
don't
done.
get 5 dragons. We're just not doing anything.
We're not doing it.
But we got pretty heated. I don't know if you watched that China Talk episode. There was some
I
heat
did not.
over. Oh, you missed it. There was a good yelling
did.
match about
Good.
Invictus Gaming and their meta lane phase. So
Yeah. That was good times.
yeah, Raz the
It's-
mediator.
It's almost like, when you
Let's
talk about
not
Star and Royal
again.
Club now, and you don't want to mention the fact that, like, they're the, the Worlds finalists, because so much has changed about their team. Like their identity from Worlds to now is so different, especially in this transitional phase.
At
Like
least they're
it almost feels like
consistent.
Invictus Gaming is like a misleading title. Like you think you're getting something from these games, you are not getting them.
Because no, none.
No,
Oh.
it's just a lie.
But
Can
at
I
least,
say that? Oh, go on. You say something first.
I was just gonna say, at least Starhorn is like consistent to their narrative. They always go
Sure.
to Worlds, and then they always take a nosedive. Like, there's never like they're at their high point and they just continue to go. It's like they gotta make some random, bizarre, giant roster switch, and everything just like goes to shit. So in that sense, like Starhorn is selling us exactly what we're buying. But
All right, so are you ready? So is Starhorn Royal Cup going to keep going? You know, throw cola, you know, into the mid
No.
lane, insect back to top. Let's do this.
They're
Let's
gonna
go.
put zero mid. They're gonna pick up Sika. They're
Huh?
gonna bring on Name. So it's gonna be
Oh my
Cola,
God.
Insect,
This all sounds amazing.
Zero, Sika, and Devil. That's just how it's gonna go. And then they're gonna go to the
Throw
World
Ackerman in
Championships.
there. They need to throw
Okay,
in
but
there.
that is the WCG 2013 experiment that already failed, is throwing Name and Sika onto
Just a
another
random
lineup
team.
and seeing
I
what
believe
happens.
it was OMG.
Yeah, I mean, look at that lineup. That lineup was sick. I remember because I was casting that event. I was so excited to have, you know, the big trio going, cool, Loveling, and then like everything you could ever want, and then it didn't work. They couldn't even beat Blaze. So I don't know.
To be fair, they looked really disjointed. I think that with time, and this is like again we talk about the illusion of the rivalry, the illusion of the perfect roster. Let's go.
There was also the illusion of competition at that tournament, because you guys don't know that they were playing on like 200 ping, but yeah. There was a reason why. So the Australian team that went their Team Immunity, I think at the time, the Team Immunity at the time, they're now the Chiefs. They played Xinjiao against CJ Blaze and completely wrecked them because no one could react to anything he was doing. So the E and mash in the queue, like there was nothing that Ambition and who was a Daydream could do. Like it just got outplayed, got double kills. So for the rest of that tournament, Daydream only played Xinjiao, and that's why they won.
Okay, that's
True
hilarious.
story.
That's actually really funny. I didn't know that.
I do want to say that Name had 100% kill participation in that fight.
You like
I
died
don't know.
on the back half of that.
She's like, I can't finish that sentence.
High ping. I've been watching a
This is
ton
important.
of CLG EU games, just you know, for fun. Just
How do you
yeah,
do
for
that
fun.
for fun?
I'm in those chats. I know what you're doing.
just brushing up on it, and you see the loading screens because these VODs are so old. It doesn't go immediately into the game, and then I'm sitting here. I'm like, oh, CLG EU wins this game against Moscow 5. Holy shit, Moscow 5 is like 150 ping. Congratulations, CLG EU. You guys deserved it.
These
That's all I
things-
have to say.
I know the context of why you're looking at those VODs, so
Oh, really?
I'll comment, yes.
Yeah, I think we're gonna avoid commenting there.
I do
I-
remember
I-
old school comments in which comments, please. Old school tournaments in which like Moscow 5 would play online tournaments, like NA online tournaments, just destroy TS7 and be like, okay, it's not even
How can
relevant.
OMG
It's
take a
ridiculous.
game off Edward Gaming outside of just saying, "Oh, they're gonna show up"? Well, let's
Oh no,
be
okay.
more-
Yeah, fair enough.
I wanna-
That's, it's not
Let's
the best
be
logic.
more.
Here's
critical
my
about
take on this: is that I feel like OMG has shown a really smart play, a play that we haven't seen from any other
Smart?
team, and their use of Sivir. Because I have to be very specific with that, because
You've
their
been
use
leaving
of
her
Sivir.
in lane for like 20 minutes and not using the ultimate, or
But see,
The fact
See,
that they kill
I don't agree
towers.
with. I agree with Raz on this one. Actually, their use of Civ has been very interesting.
because it's something you don't see out of any other team, in which, of course, technically you would love to group with Sivir. Like, you want to make use of her utility, but they actually, if teams go for the dragon, which they will definitely do if they don't see Sivir near the area, they will take a free dragon. I mean, free tower after free tower. In fact, there was one game, I think it was against LGD or IG, in which they had all 3 outer towers by the 8
Yeah,
minutes.
this was the Invictus Gaming, yeah.
Yeah,
And they took a dragon. It was like crazy.
it's ridiculous. Their ability to push towers, it gives them such a massive gold lead in the early game, in which it's easy for them to forego the first 1 or 2 dragons, in that it doesn't matter all too much, in which they can pick up the next fight off of their gold advantage, and really it works for them. And it's a good idea. I actually never thought of that, in the sense that they pretty much went all in for towers. I haven't
And
seen
that's
it
where
in
the
that team.
gold is, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
It's-
Uzi's
it's-
control of lane and those 1v0s is so impressive. Like, I mean, obviously every top 80 carry should be able to do it, but it's just picture perfect. Like, he's excellent at denying any experience to the enemy top lane. And I know what you mean. It is counterintuitive, especially we're talking back to like week 1 and 2 of the LPL, where it was like everyone in the world's like Civ is the best, wins every lane, so strong. People are kind of sussed out that you have the Jinx and other options, Caitlyn against her, but like it almost feels like they were preemptive, putting Sivir in an open lane, ensuring that she's going to come to the fight, with a quick level 6, with a BF sword pickaxe, like a big power spike. Like, okay, you're probably going to lose out in the first dragon, but it means so little, really, the first dragon, especially if you have a strong objective-focused team. And if you can show up, over-leveled on Sivir, like the base damage on your abilities are good, the 80 scaling on the Q and W is good. Like, there's definitely strategies where it's a very valid strategy, especially now where Sivir's laning phase has largely been figured out.
Yeah.
I think I will go with you. I think the most creative composition that we've seen all LPL so far this year has been the one that they used against King. And I know Papa has probably some choice words about the Maokai support, but just the way all of those champions worked together was really like the on the hunt with the onslaught of shadows from the Hecarim. The fact that he could go, like, because OMG, my criticism of them is like they want to play these pick comps, but they don't put down the vision, and they don't play in the jungle. But they don't need to with the Hecarim because it just goes in and it scatters everyone with like all the speed that it has, and then the Maokai could get the pick, and then the skill shot, and then that guy was just dead. So that was a very creative composition there.
It's like
and
if
I
you
think
look at
that
like a billiard table. The Hecarim is the white ball that just hits all the balls and they all just fly everywhere. That's what I always
and then the
imagine
Maokai support knocks it into the pocket, and the pocket is okay. This is
Did you guys talk in the last LPL week? I think we jumped patches finally. Like, the one thing that stuck out to me was that, did you notice that Clearlove moved away from like Sightstone and was building like the Hecarim pick, obviously tipped the hand, but it was going very much like frontline tank, like selfish build. They weren't focusing on vision. Like, EDG really mixed things up, and like they went from being Sightstone every champion, like obviously Sightstone Jarvan was a joke back at Worlds and now become pretty common, and the Nunu with Sightstone, and he went a lot more selfish with his builds, which I thought was super interesting. There was a trend away from supportive itemization and towards like carry Nidalee, carry Hecarim kind of builds to be a frontline. Like, it was interesting to see the teams like move away from that, even though nothing inherently changed in the patches between in terms of vision.
And I think part of that is also just the move with the support player too.
Rip.
Like, I think Mako has a lot better vision control than those.
Well, they were playing around it a lot. It was just interesting to see, like, all of a sudden the patch change. It's not, and Hecarim's stronger for sure. Like, mostly it's the top lane buff, but it still is stronger in a very good place. It was just really interesting to see, like, he basically abandoned all his active map play to farm to level 6, get big, fail a turret dive, but that was just a bit silly. And then, but like the frontline, they played around not having an overwater map really smartly, and they showed up with a Hecarim in a team fight the enemy team couldn't deal with. So it was interesting to see just such a big shift in playstyle after being so successful. And it's why I am excited about EG as a team, is that they keep doing new things. It's not like there's something to be figured out like there was for World Elite in 2012, 2013. It feels like EDG, like in a best of 5 situation, have a lot of different strategies to go to. That's kind of why.
So why do you
really
think OMG can figure them out?
I just feel like OMG, like, I mean, it's dangerous to say words like potential. It's, you look at they got great players. They've had isolated great performances from Going, Cool, and Uzi through the season so far, and maybe I'm seduced by those flying V games where it's like Vayne flying in, Ari flying in, like Lissandra flying in, crazy kind of comps they can run, the triple carry comps that probably aren't going to work against the top team. Let's be real, but. Like, a lot of it's potential based, and a lot of it's that, like, when they play the Sivir comp, for example, that they've shown that they have some smart adaptations. They're willing to go with the Maokai support, which, obviously I look at and I'm like, why is this happening? But it's 3-0, so that there's something about it. They're willing to try things that they've obviously practiced that throw the enemy team off. So if they come up with a big curveball, we're on 5.2, maybe even 5.3 this week. I do think I do come back to the ceiling being high for OMG. So I do, I guess, defer to the fact that with the members they have, with some of the glimpses we've seen this season, I think in any series against any team in the world, saying OMG is not going to take one game in a best of 3. I mean, best of 2. Okay, it's a little bit smaller, but I think they have the potential.
And one of the main reasons, I'm sorry, I wanted to get this in was I feel like it comes into like competitive, like just the competition comes into play as well because OMG recently has been playing against like LGD. They've had really solid games or really close ones in that sense. So, and then you look at EDG, and for the past 2 weeks they've played 4 sets. All of them have been actually they've been sloppy in the sense that they haven't had to try so hard in that sense. They had to go up against Energy Pacemakers, World Elite, I think GAMT, and M3, I'm pretty sure it was M3 as well. Like, they've had a really laxing couple of weeks. And so I think just the first game would be something that would really kick them into maybe, like, getting their gears going. But that's another factor that I would think of just to throw out.
What I wanted to bring up, particularly of the patch changes, because Cool is known as a big Ahri player, and of course, as we come into like the latest patch, Ahri got a nerf. Movement speed increased, but otherwise, pretty much her mana costs and her numbers were hit across the board. Do we suspect? I mean, like in World Elite's case, when last split, when they had their big decline, it was because the meta shifted away from the lone lane Wei Xiao farming by himself. Do you think that with Ahri's nerf that Cool will kind of fall off? Because he's kind of been coming back a little bit, where we've seen like these really standout performances where, oh my god, is that Cool? Is he finally back up to performance?
I don't think so. I mean, the thing about Ahri is that like, Ahri is obviously the lord of the skill matchup, right? It was always, you can blind pick Ahri and everything will be okay in general. Yeah. And then she got overtuned and everything was great. So it was like the ultimate blind pick mid. She's back to kind of the skill matchup area where like she still has an escape on her Q. She still has an offensive ability you can use to dodge skill shots. So she's still very safe in lane. She's still, you know, at level 6 is basically ungankable. There's the popularity of Vi, though, does work against that. But she's still very competitive. She's just not overtuned. So she's still a very safe blue side lock-in, you know, to give the enemy a counter pick. And his LeBlanc has been wonderful as well. I mean, probably going to see LeBlanc banned this series, realistically.
Okay.
I think the meta hasn't shifted
LeBlanc
enough to count Cool out.
What?
I think LeBlanc has been his champion more than Ahri, to be honest.
Yeah. But like historically Ahri. So this is what I wanted to like hype this up to is Cool's Ahri versus Pawn's Veigar. Come on.
We're not going to see that matchup.
But I want to see it.
I think we all want to see it, but
He's played it 3 times now?
2.
2?
Yeah. Trying to think of champions he would play, and
yeah, who do you think he'll go to?
It definitely won't be Azir. That much I'll tell you. Azir is not.
Yeah.
But
probably
to be
Azir.
fair, there is no guarantee that it's on patch 5.3.
This is true.
Like China skipped patches before, and like do stay on patches for a long time. I don't have any inside information. I don't know what patch it'll be on. But if I was a betting man, I'd probably say 5.2.
I would say Xerath pick. Just if the Azir nerfs don't go through, then Xerath becomes that champion where you can't blind pick it obviously into any matchup, but you can certainly it's a power pick in which you can just kind of work around it.
You say you can't blind pick it. We see first lock-in Xeraths all the time.
Oh god. That's true.
But the Jarvan will be open, Jarvan Rumble will be open. They'll be like, nah mate, Xerath, get him in there.
Get him.
Oh, he gets in there.
If OMG wants to win a game, they do have to do the early rush, either mid or bottom as a group, because that's probably where like finding a way to mess up Deft either through pawn and like the zone pressure he creates on that side of the map, or through just Deft himself before Clearlove kind of gets going, I think is the best way to attack Edward Gaming. And OMG historically has been that team that does the group. On the other side of the matchup, I think people keep talking about getting Cool ahead, and fundamental to that has been the pressure that Loveling is able to exert. And we saw in the LGD set, when Wayless got that ridiculous lead with the 3 kills, he didn't spend his gold like pushing on Cool and making sure Cool wasn't a factor. He spent his gold on wards and warding the jungle and making sure everyone knew where that Nidalee was the entire time. Every time Loveling tried to cross the river and try to clear out some of the guarding wards, a 3-kill LeBlanc with a Morellonomicon would not LeBlanc, Ari with a Morellonomicon would just run at him. So I think that is a big part, and Loveling likes to get Cool that early snowball with the ganks, with the lane pressure, so I think that's a really big factor on the other side.
Okay. I think that was like the majority of our notes, but I do actually have one kind of last final question for Papa Smithy in particular, because I talk to you two all the time. I wanted to get your thoughts on the current standings. So right now, I think in standing, it's EDG, Snake, and OMG are tied, and then LGD. Or no, Invictus Gaming, then LGD. So where do you rank? Like, give me your top 5 teams. Like, rank them for me.
I mean, EDG has to be one. Invictus Gaming is so hard to rate because their last 4 or 5 performances have been of that of a top team. So they're the biggest curveball. They're probably top 3 on performance, but will they keep that identity? Because remember the last time we saw them out, like Julian and I, Pastry and I, going crazy over their Yasuo Lee Sin game, which obviously they lost, and that was very anticlimactic.
Yeah,
that was like a really. They were really outpumped in that game. The double AD wasn't going to work, but it was an exciting game. But when they have it all together, they seem. And how many times have we said that about Invictus Gaming? But if they keep it up with their current strategy, like strategically, they're definitely top 3. Snake is the one we haven't talked about at all today.
Yeah.
Snake. I know that you guys have some big opinions about Snake. I've been very impressed by them, especially Beast. Like Beast is really a top jungler.
Beast.
Out of nowhere for him
Beast
to like. He's a really incredible jungler, especially given his context, right? Like you wouldn't even know he was a Korean player. Like I didn't know that he was from Korea when he first started. I'm just like, okay, Beast, and he's been really impressive, bossing around other junglers. Like the first time we saw him out, like smashing a Nunu as Jarvan, a Jarvan as Nunu, then doing the reverse matchup. Like he's been very impressive. Crystal is an amazing Draven player, that's for sure.
Beast fits that team so well, and at first I was like...
I just gave you a segue to Crystal, and you took it to Beast?
I want to go back to Crystal. I'm going to talk about Beast and that. Beast, he fits Beast perfectly. Like him and Beast,
I agree,
work well, like so well together. And that's
Ella as well needs to be talked about.
Ella is like probably one of the top tier. Like I would say,
and we haven't even talked about Flandre, like
as a support
the
player.
Real deal top lane carry.
Yeah, that's true. But
the real deal top lane carry that's playing Rumble all the time, like he's not really.
And in the Demacia Cup, he played Morgana, so that was actually really funny to watch.
Morgana, Rumble.
Yeah, so it's just okay. For instance, just going back to Beast, he works really well with Crystal in the sense that Reborn could never work well in that sense, like because Reborn was the former jungler for Snake. In that he always just played Elise, Lee Sin. Just pretty much it. That was it. That was the depth of his pool. Maybe during the time in which Elise was Evelyn was a viable jungler, he would go to that. But other than that, that was his pool. He was going to pressure the top lane early and then hope the snowball would go through with Flandre. And that's not an issue anymore, in that sense that they kind of let Flandre do his own thing, because he is a strong laner. And they have Beast pretty much take control of the map. Him and Ella just completely have that map warded. That's something we don't see in the past, like with Snake. And now, of course, with 2 of the greatest peels on that team, Crystal goes off. And he can pick whatever he wants. Before he couldn't, like he would be stuck on certain champions and hope that the rest of his team was fed enough, or at least had enough strength or items to keep him well and healthy. But now, of course, Ella is an amazing support, and Beast can keep the Nunu zone if he gets that champion. Like
how much of an upgrade is the Korean like jungle and support, like in both roles? Like it sounds like Beast is a big upgrade, but Ella's been really impressive in his own right.
I think Colin was probably the second best player on that team, but the support player. But the way that LA uses Vision, I think both of those supports really carried Crystal through his laning phase, and I think that Ella, I think, ultimately does a better job in terms of working with Beast on a more map holistic level.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Beast, I disagree a little bit, and I do think Beast stays around the top line a little bit more because I think he has that pressure really well, and that allows him to do whatever he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the focus is still very much on building up the front line because the team succeeds off of the strength of the front line in creating these team fights and these positional opportunities for Crystal.
Okay.
So I think that that's something that's key, and it's working really well. Beast's champion pool, I think, has a few question marks after the VG Gaming game, so I'd like
Sure.
to see him on stuff other than Nuno and Jarvan. But it's, I mean, if it's not broken and they keep giving it to you.
The thing about Snake is they do some of the things they do and that come off are amazing. Like the first time Crystal played Draven, when he flashed over a really fat wall to engage with his E, to start a fight. 'Cause they didn't have any engage. Some of the things they do is it's amazing that it comes off, but it's impressive for sure.
I like to call Snake the old Starhorn Royal Club in that sense.
That's probably fair.
Yeah, they're. Mhm.
The fact that you're bringing up Snake, do you think that Snake is in the top 5?
I think to argue they aren't.
Yeah.
I think you have to put some the results speak for themselves to some degree. They've got deficiencies, but nobody's been able to really exploit them. Have they lost a 2-0 series yet? Have they? I don't even know.
I don't have the
They might
standings
have.
in front of me.
I'll open up the standings.
Okay.
I mean,
I think
they're
they
6-4
have the
and
same
0, right?
exact records.
Where would you
Yeah.
where would you put them? So if you have EDG at the top, then who you
Yep.
got second?
I'll put my neck out and say OMG
Okay.
at second.
Yeah.
Third? Are we going IG?
It's Snake or IG, right? That's where I put. I don't think LGD's been as impressive as some other people do.
Mhm.
LGD, especially that 3 games in a row where they played Callista and lost all 3.
That was
that
so
was bad.
awful.
I mean,
It's
they
just
made. Yeah.
they had this strategy, right? They'd have
Yeah.
Imp play Sivir, and then PYL go for a nice walk in the jungle, get every ward down, they win the game. Then they were like, all right, let's have this AD carry that really needs the support there for basically all of her kit. And then they lost every game, and they kept doing it. It was LGD, if they can get it all together, and then they can work out whether they're going to play Acorn or Flame or both. I don't know. LGD have problems, but they have potential for sure. So I'd say I'll be the controversial one. Say Snake third, Invictus Gaming fourth, and then LGD fifth.
Okay.
Huh?
I'm actually hearing that Flame has went back to Korea. Is that true, by the way?
We don't talk about rumors on this show.
Okay.
Raz.
I was wondering if it was rumors or not. Because
Yeah.
I didn't check.
What are you talking about? What flame?
No, I
Oh
don't
my!
know.
Raz, did you hear that GE and EG
Do not break the
scrimmed?
internet, please.
Can we not?
Kelsey,
Doing
did
that.
you know that they scrimmed and they
Oh,
went
gosh.
0-5?
Yeah.
And the LPL, it's not as good as the LCK, confirmed.
Confirmed.
Yeah, for
Okay,
me.
this
Hmm?
that same time period, EDG's beat team almost beat
She can't let it
GE
go. She
Tigers
has to
and
go.
IE
She knows that it's
and
a bait.
IEF.
We're just
No,
trolling here,
no.
Kelsey.
The
It's
thing
okay.
is that I
It's okay.
think
It's okay. Don't worry about
GE
it.
I think GE is a better team than Edward Gaming, but if you go for the scrim results that happened 2 months ago as your argument, that just
It's. I would go. It's LGD is a strange one for me because I feel like they
Raz
are.
is like,
there-
LGD, let's talk about them.
I
Are
feel
we
like
still doing
if you
the
go
rankings?
off
I was
the
giving the rankings to
performance-
Papa Smithy. You get the rank sheet
Okay,
all the
what
time.
am I talking about?
I made my rankings. I got my top 5 locked in. Edward
Yeah.
Gaming, OMG, Snake, IG, and LGD.
He put
Yeah.
IG
If you
real
go
high.
off the performance of IG for the past couple or few sets, you have to go off the performance of LGD for the
Yeah.
past couple sets.
That's true.
And I think LGD showed very different. They went back to what they were doing with more roam for PYL and more importantly, more room for Moilus. I think one issue they were having is just how do we support Chwen better
Mhm.
because the jungle is different. and they're used to this dynamic where Wayless farms Chuen's jungle himself to like beef up his laning phase and just overpower the enemy player and farm. So now he's playing almost more of this help Chuen style because the camp changes, right? The camp timer.
Ain't
Now
nobody
there's
got
an
no time
increase.
for that. It's 140.
Yeah, 140 as opposed to 114 is pretty significant. Limits the amount of gold available to that kind of strat and makes that strategy much less viable. So it's gone more towards Wayless lays down the vision control, and he placed that pink ward that he got the first kill off of in that OMG himself. So he's putting like gold into these wards, like helping protect Chuen's jungle, TBQ's jungle, and I think that in that type of strategy has me like really high in LGD. And if Wayless is able to exert more of that pressure, then they might even be able to play Callista okay. I'm not gonna say that they should, but obviously Callista is becoming more and more relevant of a pick. The other thing is that LGD traditionally has been a high death team relative to where they rank in the standings. Like last split, they ended up 4th, but they had like 1.5 times as many deaths as any of the other top, as even the top
Kelsey,
5 teams.
aren't you releasing all of this information in a video that's supposed to be coming out soon?
No, not all of this information. This is separate. The LGD
okay.
information that I'm talking
Don't
about right
cannibalize
now.
your content, Kelsey. Don't worry about it.
Kelsey,
Make them pay.
Exactly.
No, this last point is just about how they always have the minion waves pushing, because the reason why they're able to die so many times without losing games is just because their control of their side lanes is like so good. They never pick fights unless their waves are pushed, things like that. Those types of things make me really high in LGD. So.
I think the proper way to put that is they're not as punished for their high death count because of their minion control, not their minion control is so good that it allows them to die more.
It allows them to take more
What's
risks
wrong with
and make
reverse
more
causality?
plays.
It's all good.
Come on, get the rhetoric down. They can make more
okay.
plays. Okay? They make the sick plays.
I understood what you were saying, I just think it might have gotten a little confusing in there. But
Let's go out there and die, boys.
I will give this promo to Kelsey. She's made a fantastic video about Wayless and LGD in particular. I think it's like 30 minutes long. It will be coming out soon. I think she's finishing the editing on it, where she covers a lot of the stuff and in depth and why Wayless is amazing and LGD is really cool. Yes?
Something like that.
That's my promo for you. And
Yeah.
you didn't even have to
Thank
pay
you.
me for that. I just gave it to you for free.
So fancy.
But with that, I'm actually going to start to close it down because I have to run to the store before it closes. I know Papa Smithy may or may not have a time constraint on him.
A little bit.
Yeah, exactly. But with that, we need closing statements, and I'm going to give it to our guests first, which, again, thank you so much, Papa Smithy, for taking the time to join us. I know we've been really excited. We wanted one of the LPL casters on here. We were super lucky to get you. I've always been a big fan, so can I have your autograph?
We'll see what we can organize. I'm sure we'll be meeting up before too long. We'll work it out.
I'm sure.
But I mean, in general, like it's good to finally talk to you guys. You know, on camera. Obviously, we've had our little chats. You know, all of you have been very helpful to upskill us towards the LPL, and we're doing our best to do the content justice. I think that's what all of us that have ever put our hands up to be involved with the LPL have done. Whether it was us years ago or you guys last year, like. It's great content. There's a reason why we're all so passionate about it. Is that some of those games are just something special.
Raz?
For shoutouts, I think I want to talk about the casters for the Oceanic casters, because they have to cast how many games? Like,
Oh my
let
God.
alone LPL work. Then they have to go into casting for like the Rich Gang. And
Well, it's
that
a
will-
lazy 32 matches a week. We love casting, guys. Don't worry about it. We'll keep it together.
amazing work. But yeah, I'd like to do shoutouts on just like that, as well as like Liquid Legends and Paravine. That's about it.
Kelsey, shoutouts?
Oh, Drexen.
Oh my
Drexen.
God.
Drexen.
Drexen.
Drexen would want everyone to know that Messiah counted the Twisted Fate cards first. This is very important to him.
How does
Messiah?
Drexen feel? How does Drexen feel about the comp that Pastry Time loves the most? The AP Scion Volibear Jungle comp.
I'm
He
sure
must love that one.
Drexen as well. Too bad he was not
That
available
game.
tonight so that we could
Oh,
ask
yeah.
him directly.
Keep that as a backup question for next time.
Yeah, I've heard
Oh,
that
yeah,
that's
for
his
sure.
favorite.
I mean, who's his?
He wasn't able
I mean,
to
it
join
has
us
nothing
because
to
he's
do
at
with
a,
Messiah, so that's a little sad.
a Fantasy Star Universe convention.
Oh.
That's pretty cool, actually. Jeez.
Yeah. You didn't know.
Oh, well,
God, I need to go out more.
What? That's what you're gonna. Oh, he's at a Fantasy Star Universe.
It's time to leave the
convention.
house, boys.
I
Gotta
need to
get
go
to
out.
the MMO convention.
Kelsey, what's your shout out?
thank you to the Score for letting me write articles. I just put one up about Quay 11 Deft where I talk about how EDG plays in more detail. One should be coming out about the OMG composition this week sometime, as well as a preview for the OMG EDG match. Look, I just cannibalized all of my content.
Yep. Good job.
Congratulations. Also, shout out to the Oceania casters as well. Thank you very much, Papa Smithy, for coming on. I would like to say thank you for all of your work to the LPL scene and kind of letting the continuation come together tonight, so it's great.
And as
My
the
pleasure.
final closing, remember that you guys can go and watch the LPL at twitch.tv/riotgames2. It eats up most of the
Two's a
weekend.
bigger number than one. It's better, so just come
Exactly.
join us. Don't worry about
Don't even watch LCK. It's not LPL better. Go watch Papa Smithy and Pastry Time, Atlas, and Tiberi. Although I think he might go as Spawn on the
it. Spawn.
Spawn, Atlas, Pastry Time, and Papa Smithy.
I like Tiberi better as a name, I'm sorry, but...
I'll pass on the feedback. There's still time. Don't worry about it.
Combine them, Tiberi spawn.
Likewise,
That's horrible.
go follow all their Twitters, and as final closing statement, I will promote some of my content coming out. I have a big video coming out centered around Froggen, so everyone should be watching
goody.
for that one.
I saw the genesis of that video, and I'm very interested to see the actual video that's resulted from
I'm
it.
terrified.
After the last 4 days
Personally.
collecting clips, it's almost ready, but here we
I'm
go.
afraid. I'm afraid.
You should be afraid.
You should
I feel like it's just gonna be a 5-second video. He's like, he's horrible. You're, oh God, no, Frost, what have you done?
That's why you need two cuts. One of them is just that. Send it to Thorin. He'll love it.
Exactly, I'll just make a GIF. This is at the point where everyone waves. Everyone has to wave.
I'm waving you just on that roster that you might be familiar with would be Whites, Tabe. Actually, Xiao Xiao was the only Invictus Gaming member who was kind of on the team at the time, and he played top lane. So, just kind of the novelty there, watching some of the players transfer from the rosters. There were actually 4 big teams at the time. There was WE, called World Elite, Catastrophic Cruel Melody, excuse me, Memory.
Yeah,
Worst team name ever.
it was pretty
invented.
bad. Yeah.
NGG and
E-home.
eHome, right. And eventually eHome was formed with, and actually what happened was PDD played 80 carry for NGG, and then he moved to eHome, and he played for them for a while, and notably they appeared, I think it was the first Chinese team to really appear at an international event, in
But
one
the
of the
idea
IEMs
is-
where he actually played with Vasily. They appeared and they got crushed by Moscow 5.
But the overarching idea, and the reason why I kind of wanted you to start you guys here is because there's so many big names that even if you haven't been watching LPL for that far back, you still recognize all these names. And we also kind of start crossing lines when we start talking about Noah's Ark and how long Going, Cool, and PYL, and all these like big names in LPL have been in the scene for a very long time. And so that was the main starting point for here. So now we've had names like, you've been throwing out Tabe, Whites, obviously from Royal Club. Tabe, very famous with the Western audience due to his interview. PDD, Xiao Xiao, former IG when they were at their height. So now it's kind of like move into the golden era when things really start taking shape and these dynasty teams start forming, particularly in Invictus and World Elite.
Right. And that's kind of what I was getting at, is eventually what really started Invictus Gaming kind of going was when PDD moved from eHome to Invictus Gaming, they picked up, like, along the way, they picked up Illusion, they picked up Zatai. I think Kid was the last one to join the roster. They were impressed because he actually beat Zatai in the mid lane, and then they made him play
How old
AD
was
carry.
Kid at this point, though? That's the question.
He's like the same age as Zatai, so
What, they're
they were
17
both
now?
like
14? 13?
they're 17 now, yeah. So they would have been like 2011. They would have been like 13, 12.
China.
No, but I think 2012 was when they joined IG and they joined the competitive scene. So this is already getting into kind of those roots.
Mhm.
So we've advanced sort of to 2012. So
Okay.
that was kind of when IG forms, and they really begin contesting, and eHome and kind of NGG sort of fade away, and we're left with World's Elites and Invictus Gaming.
Which is now where we can kind of start bringing up this storyline, because we've kind of glossed over a little bit. I'm going to now try to throw it back to Papa Smithy, since I threw him the first
Sure.
one and he just like hot potatoed it back to me.
I just deflected it, you know. Poof, no, thank you.
Okay, so everyone, I think the easiest comparison to make is CLG TSM. The West is very familiar with that one. So kind of in those, in that context, with that vocabulary, set up Invictus Gaming and World Elite for me.
I mean, obviously my first involvement came just after Worlds, when obviously World Elite had already made their waves. I guess the thing most people don't realize is like how soon before World Finals, so Season 2 Worlds, Clear Love and FCZF joined that team. Like they were pretty much a new lineup, like a relatively new lineup at Worlds. So jumping in just after Worlds to the Enter the Dragon tournament, which was back in the days of those Pan-Asia tournaments, you got a lot of those Korea and China and even sometimes invitations of the Southeast Asia region tournaments. That tournament, I think, was the debut of Katie Rolster, Arrows and Bullets, their first event with their original lineup. Who else was there? It was World Elite and Invictus Gaming with the Chinese representatives. I think Romaine was there, which went on to become GSG, and a lot of those names still around the scene now, like Acorn, I think, was on that lineup still back then. This is, again, a long time ago. But basically, the gist of that was World Elite winning that tournament and then just going on a tear. Like, World Elite, most popular, like, we talk about popularity of teams. Like, I'm sure you guys can speak to it. Even, like, up to, like, early last year, like, World Elite's popularity. It's just so hard to convey what percentage of, like, Chinese League of Legends fans were World Elite fans. It was a high number.
Yeah, that something that one of my friends who's Chinese likes to say is that even people who don't really play League of Legends or know what it is know who World Elite are, right?
So I mean, like a soccer analogy would be like Manchester United, right? Like a team that I think they come up with a stat, Manchester United, that like 1 in 4 people in the world is a Manchester United fan, which doesn't really mean anything, but it lets you know just how pervasive the team name and kind of the iconology is. Like, even if you don't know League of Legends really well, you knew World Elite. It's in the icons in the client is like the clincher, right? Like for that to be true is crazy, to be honest. But and then Invictus Gaming, they were like, it took 2 to tango. That's why great rivalries are all about, you know, how good your opposition. And Invictus Gaming on their day, like especially back then, like the one thing I could say about Invictus Gaming is that their like performance in best of ones, or like their performance in like surprise strategies like turret diving. They were one of the first teams to really aggressively turret dive, and their off-meta picks. PDD could play anything in top. Like, just the natural rivalry between those two teams was just wonderful to watch. And there were so many tournaments without like the LPL, without like a league system. These teams were still facing each other in best of 5s at a really regular clip, which is why it was so exciting to follow.
So,
I just want to say, like, regional familiarity was such a big thing, just because, like, World Elite was going on to their strongest point, and like obviously, like, they were probably renowned as like the best team in the world. I guess we're gonna talk about that later, but like even still, like IG was taking them to
Almost like this one player would be good and then they would fall out. PDD had this insistence on playing like always this damage style top laner. Zatai would have these like weird pocket picks that worked for a while, but you kind of got this idea that he wasn't super serious all the time.
And then you had Kid, who was always consistent, and he was almost always watched. Because I mean, IG basically at that point would win a game in the first 15 minutes or 20 minutes through like crazy turret dives or rotations. And if
Yeah.
World Elite could like weather the storm and stay within 5k gold, you're like, all right, they're gonna eventually get there. So it was just crazy. I mean, and then Kid was the only one whose identity wasn't like this crazy player. He was a pretty consistent player on a team full of eccentric players. And that was my observation of him, at
This
least.
sounds like so many different. Kelsey, pull your mic out of your face. It's like
Yeah.
right under. You're like breathing on it really intensely. It's funny because asking you guys to kind of give like the short of who these teams are, it sounds so often like a lot of the rivalries that we will consistently have. Like even if you go all the way back to CLG they were the late game team that they would just come out crazy at like 55 minutes in the game. They'd pull it out. More recently, we have like the Samsung Blue versus Samsung White comparison, like that
Yeah.
crazy early snowball aggression versus the patient waiting, big team fight. So I don't know. I find it a little bit curious how these storylines just keep happening. We keep having these two massive difference in styles competing against each other. But there we go. That's the synopsis of who these teams were, and we've kind of now touched upon just the very beginning of kind of their dominance and things like that. So let's now push the clock forward a little bit more. We can go into like the high of World Elite and Invictus Gaming. So, and we say it all the time, but like really break down how dominant was World Elite. Because Kelsey, I think you even make some of the statements that World Elite was one of the best teams to ever play League of Legends, or was the best team to ever play League of Legends.
I don't go that far. I think there have been more dominant teams, but for the period of time that they were ahead, I think that this is kind of...
I tried to
Papa
get her to bite and
Smithy's-
she wouldn't do it. She just like, she reeled back and was like, whoa.
I saw the layup. It was coming in. Yeah, the dunk. Didn't pull
Just
the
like-
trigger.
And then SKT would just like, smack.
Nope.
Yep.
I think talking to
Damn it,
Papa Smithy, WE is kind of like his love, in terms of Chinese teams. So.
Are we gonna have a bromance? Is this gonna happen?
The bromance, the World Elite bromance. We were talking about Clear Love and where you'd rate him in like a top X players of all time, which
Oh
is
my god, let's do this.
it's the most difficult because obviously Thorin's list provokes a lot of discussion, and you look at someone like you look at the list of accomplishments for some of these players, especially the World Elite players have just this massive amount of like big wins, like land wins. Of course, people might not know, but there's just been so many tournaments run in China, especially like Asia before OGN kind of came to the fore. But like before the LPL started, there was so many land tournaments. It's still a lot of them run between seasons. So they have these list of accomplishments. Like, can you imagine how long the list of accomplishments would be for Clear?
I did press the start button there, so everyone remember our rules that we set. Okay. I'm your host of China Talk. I'm Frostgren, and we have our very special guest. We are doing this at a different time, if you guys noticed, just to kind of, compensate for the time zones here. But our special guest is going to be Papa Smithy, LPL shoutcaster, casting this year's LPL. Looks fantastic already. If you haven't listened to it, you should go listen to it. Of course, we've got two normal panelists on. We've got Kelsey Moser, now working for, I'm totally spacing it, The Score. There we go.
Yep.
And
Nailed it.
Razzleplasm, do you have any announcements of who you're working for?
Yep. Well, Paravine and Liquid Legends.
Okay, I didn't want to.
Okay.
I didn't want to spoil anything if something were to come out.
Okay.
You just dropped him in it and hoped that he could run with
I
it,
know,
though,
right? We
Yeah, I was like,
No, nothing to
I'm
announce
actually
today.
the new god of esports.
and this is when I announced that I'm working for. No,
the Score Raz.
Keep it down.
Okay.
no, but obviously we're doing a special episode because we really wanted to have Papa Smithy on, and to kind of give like a little bit of background, if you're super brand new to LPL, I know we kind of have a different mix of audience as far as like our core viewers. Some of them are like hardcore LPL, been watching it since the beginning. Some people are coming in newer with like the Korean Exodius coming over. Papa Smithy's been casting LPL for a really long time. Did take a bit of a break in there, but I mean, almost from like the origins, way back when. So we wanted to do an episode that was really kind of about the history, especially as we come up to prepare for the second half of the split, because right now I believe we're 5 weeks in. There's 11 weeks of LPL total. They're on Chinese New Year break. They'll come back, and on the 27th we have the big game, which is OMG versus EPG. But we kind of wanted to build up for that. So my first question, just to really soft pitch it to you guys, is going to go all the way back to 2011. And I want to talk about like the very beginnings of kind of the Chinese League of Legends scene with teams like eHome, the Great World Elite, and things like that. So I'm actually going to give it to Papa Smithy first. So just kind of like set the groundwork for me back then.
2011's even before my time. I'm going to be real here. Like I started casting the Asian scene with Enter the Dragon in 2012. So if anyone knows, anyone can open the floor to it. I mean, Kelsey's probably the person that knows that stuff the best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I wasn't watching, just to be clear, in 2011 I wasn't watching Chinese League of Legends, but I've retroactively watched a lot of the VODs, and I've kind of looked at some of the stuff that happened back there. Really, the relevant information, I think, is just people will be interested more for, I guess, the novelty factor, that PDD used to be considered like the greatest AD carry in China in 2011. This was before Wei Xiao. Messiah used to play AD carry. But to set the stage, Invictus Gaming and WE would sort of become the Chinese League of Legends rivalry of 2012, and then much later after the golden age of WE, which we'll get into. And the team started off as Catastrophic Cruel Memory, and names on
To the further
5 games every time.
like every single time. And that was that's actually how I got into like Chinese League of Legends. I wasn't like watching it like dedicated at that time, but every single time I'd like watch it just for kind of like IG and World Elite. And IG was my favorite team because they would just try crazy stuff, and they would always take them to 5 games. So it was pretty funny to watch.
So,
And I think
kind of give me the shorthand a little bit, because we've talked about what this rivalry became and kind of like the domestic precedence of it and a little bit of the global context. But who are these teams? Like, can you guys give me a condensed version of? We say that IG's like crazy. They came up with the crazy picks. They do the crazy turret dives. But can you guys take both these teams and break them down? Like, where were their powers weighted in lane? Who were the members to watch out for, and kind of how they worked as teams as far as play style?
I think I probably can. Like World Elite were always a late game focused team. The moment they settled their roster, especially post Worlds, because if you remember, like one of the big criticisms of World Elite at Season 2 Worlds was that Wei Xiao would farm in the side waves, never group, and they just kind of got, I mean, there wasn't really the language for this, but they got out-rotated to a large degree, because there would be so many fights where, well, like Wei Xiao would be farming in the off lane, and people would look at his CS values, but he's not grouped. And it felt like they just didn't quite have their synergies down. But post Season 2 Worlds, like, as these tournaments like the Enter the Dragon, the Stars War League, which we'll get to, were happening, they found their timings better, and they were just the best team in the world at taking games late. Like they were so good at understanding their power spikes. They were very quick. I mean, the famous article that Clement Chu was referencing on his Summoning Insight appearance recently, the whole control of the side waves, the sixth man. They were very on top of that at a very at the infancy of the scene, to the point where they were just able to. They were the best team at extending a game to late, and their late game team fighting was unparalleled. That's basically my observation of World Elite.
And Invictus Gaming, I think, is interesting because they have these ridiculous highs, and WE during this period was definitely more controlled in terms of their ability to be dominant for such an extended period of time, and have this sort of consistent identity and playstyle, whereas Invictus Gaming just had these highs where they found something that worked, and then just would inexplicably fall apart, just like a seesaw all the time. I think going into the Season 2 World Championships, IG almost kind of seemed like the better Chinese team. They had just won the Nice Game tournament against Azubu Frost, which was the big Korean team going into the Season 2 Worlds, right? And it was a pretty exciting finals. It was like 3-2. I can't remember the super details, but it was really interesting, and I think there were even a lot of people who, well, not a lot, but like an obscure, like a small pocket who thought maybe IG could pull an upset at Season 2 Worlds. But at the same time, IG had